Yeah. So I think we're live now.
Are we?
Welcome back to This is Dundermoose, guys. Oh my goodness, is this going to be a fun one? I have got the critical Dom,
Mhm.
Dominic himself, and he is coming. And we are here. If you saw, I did do kind of a spicy little thumbnail and some descriptions, but um, really, we're not trying to be controversial. We're just trying to talk about how do we get to the root of the history of the hobby. And how do we respond to the efforts of what's been going on and how it's kind of been and stuff. So let me just first ask, how has your week been, man? It's been crazy. It's been here in Michigan. It's been really hot. Um, how have you been doing, bro?
It's been miserable. It's been
Yeah.
hot. I'm just south of the border from you, Indiana. So, unfortunately, it's one of those deals where my wife and I have a list. Okay, it's summer. We got to get stuff done. One of them is working on my garage. I got to replace a lot
Yep.
of stuff. I got to build a wall out there, but it's too hot to do that.
Oh
What we've
yeah.
been focusing on is actually scraping off old paint on the side of our house and then repainting stuff. Problem
This
is, the
paint.
house was built in 1900, and there are like 3 layers of paint. So you got your
Ooh,
little scraper, and like,
you got to get through that asbestos layer.
yeah,
You know, the vermiculite.
oh
Um,
yeah. So
does the paint
it's been
scrape
busy.
easier in 101-degree weather, or
Sometimes, depending
yeah?
on how the moisture
Malachi
works
here.
underneath it.
Malachi hit
Oh my
100
god,
both today and yesterday in Pennsylvania.
dude, I've just been hiding all day and reading books in preparation for this because there's a lot of
Okay,
stuff that we might talk about that I might get to. So it's
right.
like, all right, I got all this stuff
So
ready.
I've not been preparing for this. I only just got this stuff. So here's my week. I've got a full time job and I do a side hustle. And for whatever
Mhm.
reason, this week I had a afternoon class Monday and Wednesday, and had a morning class Tuesday and Thursday.
Holy crap.
And the morning class is one I've not taught before, so I'm totally like trying to prep myself before it. And I was telling Critical Dom before we went on the air, on Saturday, I'm down here prepping. Our AC kicks on, and I just smell this really acrid smell, and it sounds like dripping, like water dripping. I'm like, what the heck? So I get there behind my curtain, and it's not dripping, it is sizzling. The main line to our circuit breaker in the house is like so hot I can't even touch it. I'm like, well, that's not good. Smoke coming out. So called the electric. I didn't think we were gonna have a show tonight. I thought I was gonna be without power, as I got like a whole redo on it. But thankfully, they were able to replace a faulty breaker. My house didn't burn down, and we're still coming to you live on This Is Dundermoose. So
Lucky, lucky.
yeah, man. Like it's been like this for a while, and I just never put it together that it was the breaker panel. I was like, what is that smell? That is weird. But it's in a basement. Basement smells are weird.
Mhm.
Um, but all that to say, Chaos Theory was not able to stop us. We are still coming to you live tonight, and we got some stuff to talk about. Um, Let me chuck it up here on the banner so you guys know what's coming. Uh, Dungeons and Dragons, an American institution. This is a Kickstarter that you're launching. When are you launching it?
We're launching in July,
In
so
July.
very, very soon.
So very, very soon. So like if for those of you that like me that need to save up our pennies for the Kickstarters, someone that like may have gone all out a little bit ago
Okay.
on the
Come on.
popular
Oh.
elite.
Mm.
Oh, you can smell it. You can
It
smell it.
still has the scent. Oh, that's glorious.
Choice.
I got enough on
Primo.
the chair.
But it's time to start. It's time to start saving up those pennies again. Um, I don't know what it is. I think it's because I'm in the Bro SR.
Yeah.
But I have an unusual fascination with how this stuff got started, with like what were the original ways. And I feel like a lot of it is things that people were having crazy fun, and then we have kind of missed it. We have lost the plot along the way. The thing that D&D has become is not nearly as good as what it used to be. That's my feeling. That's my opinion. I don't want to put words in anyone else's mouth. But to me, that is kind of what gets to this fascination with who were these geniuses? How did they come up with this thing that just you can start off playing as a 12-year-old, and there are guys older than me that are still enjoying it? well into their twilight years, and it really is a new genre of entertainment. It's like its own thing. So I'm fascinated with that. How did you get on this present track? How did you get interested in history of Dungeons and Dragons, and where did you go to try to learn about it?
It's actually a really simple answer. Back in December, the Basic Expert put out a video, and he actually found online a copy of it's like Europa 6-8, and in it there's this article about elitism in wargaming, because our hobby is wargaming ultimately, right?
Yeah.
That's what it comes out of. And in it there is this gal. She's giving the statement on why she doesn't really like wargaming, and partially it's because her beau likes to go into another room and she's not in there, but occasionally she will hear him scream out, "Blood must flow," as if, in the modern time, we're doing the chant of corn.
That's
Blood
right.
for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, right?
Skulls for the
And
skull.
then in the next issue, because of what had been happening at the time period in 1975, because Gygax was being set upon, and he had just really been starting to sell a little bit of D&D, he has to respond to these allegations of him being like a sexist, male, chauvinist pig, that old phrase. And he makes this very sarcastic response, in which he does actually say, "Damn right, I'm a sexist," but it's clearly written in a sarcastic tone if you can actually read.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I got very lucky over this weekend. This is probably something that looms greater despite the terrible weather. Lee Gold retired. And I had actually tried this past weekend to maybe buy some more copies of A&E off of her. But she told me in an email that she's not selling them anymore because she retired. I was under the impression I would not be able to actually get any digital copies of Alarms and Excursions for what I'm working on.
Which is one of the original zines, like
yes, 1975. Early. Like it is right after in the time span of Greyhawk, right? So I think it's before Blackmore comes out. And because of that, I actually thought there's going to be this huge hole in what I'm trying to write, because I'm interested in reception. Okay, what do people think about the game? How do they do their different misunderstandings of rules? Let's be honest. But that also would give me a West Coast notion of the game as opposed to a regular Midwestern deal.
Whopper Wizards referring to the Bronstein Hailsteinzer, where we both might have ingested some wyvern poison. And then I had to. I thought it was a good risk. I thought I could take him out and like take my chances, but turns out no, it killed me on the first roll, and that was when I started smelling and hearing the fizzling, and I was like, I gotta go, guys. So yeah, well, more on that tomorrow.
You start grasping at your throat and fall out. You turn the camera off, go check what's going on.
Yeah, and then I start coughing for real.
There was a very generous individual, one of my followers on Twitter, and he actually sent me a fair amount of them so I can actually look at some of this stuff.
So you are interested in the original documents from the period. You are filling in gaps, and you're going to the sources.
And that brings up a huge, nigh insurmountable issue: is access to this stuff. My background is in American history. My master's degree is in American Revolutionary History. Okay. And you have to have access to an archive if you want to do some of this stuff. You don't have that for this hobby. We don't have a spot we can go to and just say, all right, everything is organized. If you want to find it, there it is. Yeah. And because of that, what winds up happening is a few select individuals who, either because of connections or because of special access, they get a look at the stuff, they get to write it, and then they get to say what it means. Yeah. Do you ever read one history book? No. You need more perspectives. So mine's going to be the better one because I actually have the background, I have the training. And more importantly, I'm going to try to set some certain things correct. I mentioned this a little bit before the stream, but one of the issues that we are dealing with, and it's related to the whole Europa thing, is whether or not we can actually expect somebody from the past to hold on to our modern moral sensibilities.
That's right.
And that's an issue that goes back to Jefferson, right? Because most people know that he tried to get a paragraph into the Declaration of Independence blaming the king for the evils of slavery, which is a bit silly on its face, but it at least shows that he was attempting to change something. But as I've explained to my own students, I've taught American history for Purdue, for example. It's difficult to, first off, get outside the meat suit if we're going to talk about ethics and morals. Second, you really cannot expect reasonably a society that did not believe everybody who had this pallid, pasty tone, who thought that not all guys with this tone were equal, to then think everybody's equal, because
Mm,
they say this in principle, but they don't really understand it just yet. That's why it's
yeah.
taken us, 250 years to actually go quite far, and
And
it's
so that's
also
that's an
why America's
interesting
awesome.
parallel.
Mhm.
They wrote something that was truer than what they knew. Much like Frank Herbert making Paul Muad'Dib the actual hero of Dune, and then
Mhm.
spending tons of books trying to undo that, and then all the directors trying to undo it, and even the actors. And nobody understands that Paul is such an absolute Chad that he is the hero in spite of his own writer. Um, Much like Gary Gygax, who I'm told, after having written copiously and in all caps about strict timekeeping records and how in asides and parentheticals 1-to-1 time is the best, did not himself practice that. And I've got that on authority of Rob Kuntz, so guy who played with Gary.
Mhm.
um,
Can't
so
talk about
maybe
Coons at
much
this
like the
moment.
founding fathers, he wrote something that was truer than he was capable of living up to, and it only took the passage of time and deeper minds and better experiences to bring the truth of it out into the light. Luckily, we didn't have to fight a bloody civil war to make everyone equal. We just had to be mean to some ankle biters on Twitter. So, props for that.
Yeah, it's better to just argue things out than load up your musket.
Yeah.
But Rob Kuntz, in my opinion, is one of these guys who's trying to control the reputations and also the interpretations of both Gygax and Arneson, really for his own purpose.
Hmm.
While I'm really going after Peterson for what he wrote here, playing at the World 2 Eve, I did really enjoy his game Wizards because of a lot of the details it does give. In it, he explains that once Kuntz was basically done directly working for TSR, he did kind of a freelance thing. And after Arneson was fired, Rob Kuntz was his little mole inside the organization. He sent letters explaining what was kind of going on and, just feeding some
Interesting.
information to Arneson as he was carrying out what he termed his Great War. Because what's really interesting about that book is how it tracks Arneson's movements after he was fired from TSR, um, particularly in trying to change public opinion about TSR in his favor.
Hmm.
Because in his opinion, OD&D wasn't what he wanted, and Blackmore wasn't what he wanted. And when he was let go, he was actually on the hook for a couple of projects he hadn't put out yet, and that kind of helps explain why there's this gradual process of uh, him doing these various things because they all had to work on numerous projects at the same time. Mailing room, doing some editing, doing
Yeah,
whatever.
they put him down. They
Just keep
put
the
they put
company going.
stinking Arneson in the mailing room. Can you believe that?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
like,
because they all had to do it. They all had to take
yeah, yeah. I
turns. It
mean, I
was,
understand
his turn
that,
in the
but
barrel, to use that phrase.
yeah, everyone taking their turn. But so informal games in the chat. How's it going, Griff? I don't know if you've seen Secrets of Blackmore.
I have
Um,
several times.
but yeah, as a Johnny come lately, as a non-gaming mook up until just a few years ago,
Hmm.
I had heard of Gygax. Arneson was just like the other guy that helped. It wasn't until I saw that movie that I was like, holy crap,
Oh
man,
yeah.
Arneson was huge. I love that movie. I like you. I've seen it multiple times. It kind of it was one of the things that set me on my path to where I'm like, again, no, I'm not trying to say if you enjoy 5e, you should definitely be able to play that and enjoy it and continue.
Hmm.
I'm playing with some of my bros. So, I got a couple dudes that I grew up with that I still play a 5e game with. But for my money, there is no bang for the buck like the original stuff. Like just the sense of dread and wonder as you go in to explore something. You don't know what's going on. And you don't have a head full of all the character options that you min maxed against each other to make sure that you can do everything. Sorry, I don't want to get off on a 5e rant. All that to say, uh, it makes a difference to have multiple views of the original stuff, because if you just get one person's point of view, they may not share the reasons why they came down hard on one side or another. And it may be because I'm trying to get the truth out, or maybe, man, this guy was such a jerk, and I don't want his version to be the one that wins. You have no idea all of the pressure and stuff that goes on unless you take the time to go through and look at the source material like you're doing. So hats off to Griff. Welcome to the chat. That's why I'm excited about your project. And I especially like the approach of not saying, let's take today's mores and values and stuff and slather it on. First, we should try to understand what was going on in their time and who they were writing to and who they were writing for. And then you can understand what they say, and only then come out and try to apply it to yourself and today. That's my take on it anyway.
Right. They're writing for wargamers in a particular time period.
So people like yourself that are trying to get at those, you're saying there's no archive, there's no source of all of that. You need to have a connection. You need to have a personal relationship with somebody that can get you that stuff, right?
Yeah. So, for example, I wanted to get, say, the Doomsday Book, however you want to pronounce it.
Okay.
The Castellan Crusade Society. Little note that they did. There are only so many copies, and you can't find it online. Luckily, there are some gentlemen and scholars who put up the strategic review and like all of the Dragon up online on the Internet Archive. So that's fantastic to be able to go back and check out.
For as long as it will last, right? Like I remember there was a website called The Trove where you could get some really awesome stuff until it got taken down. So
so
we can't depend on those online repositories.
So to some extent, you have to take it, make it, save in your computer and save access.
So it sounds like, though, there may be some people who get access to original materials and it's not in their best interest to share. Like maybe they get some value out of hoarding or limiting access to others. And it may be just because they had to work hard to get it and they don't want to just throw it out there. Or it may be that they have a certain version and they don't want to get disproved. That's kind of what I was picking up from what you said. Is that what you're kind of intimating, is that there's people that know that if everyone had access to the root material, that like it would poke holes in their theories?
It certainly can. And what I'm talking about is also an issue you have in professional history, where if somebody happens to find a thing in an archive that nobody else has found just yet, they will move heaven and earth to try to maintain their access to it and only be the person who has that, so that they can be the one who produces the book. And then sometimes, because of their special access,
because if you don't, it's a race, right? If you don't,
it's an arms race.
If you don't, if you get it out there, then somebody that may not love it as much or understand as much may get their thing out before you published yours. So it's I can just hang on to this, and then I got the scoop. I got I got the straight dope on it. Okay.
Yeah, and luckily, some of the stuff is getting published now, so you can at least purchase it. Secrets of Blackmoor, you mentioned that. Lost Dungeons in Tonisburg, I've got that.
I got that one too.
The Blackmoor book along with it. So you combine that stuff with, say, First Fantasy Campaign. You wind up with a pretty good approximation of Arneson's thoughts on a lot of stuff. Although it's the case in First Fantasy Campaign that he doesn't exactly say how the game is run, or at least how he did it, which is very interesting from an opportunity perspective, because that is him putting it out there once he has gone from TSR, and he's trying to set the record straight. He's trying to show how much of D&D was his, because the initial spark was his. And then,
so I had Kuntz on my show, and the burning question that I had the most was, what was the difference, from someone who's played for both, what was the difference in DMing between Gary and Dave? And he said, you would have to ask the Blackmoor bunch. So I was profoundly disappointed, because I wanted to hear from someone who's played with both. What were they like as a DM? What was their specialty? Like Griff in the chat, he is someone, I still haven't played with him. I'm going to try to get to Arneson this year.
Cool.
But he is someone that I've heard multiple people talk about, how he takes a moment, he gets in the world himself, and then he brings you in through description, and like that's one of the things that stands out to him. And so I'm just fascinated, man, the guys that came up with this stuff, how did they do it? What was their thought process, and what were they trying to achieve? So Oh
Well,
man,
part of
what
it
a
was
fascinating
actually
topic.
how they DM'd because you got that little black screen back there. Arneson was behind it, and the
Yeah.
only thing he could do would be to sit down, and you got your little map. You don't even necessarily have a character sheet at this stage. The guy behind the screen's got it, and by pure description, you're doing it. Now that would be
You didn't
difficult to do today.
so Arneson didn't even give out character sheets. Like he just kept all the stats.
Yeah, I don't think it was always the case. You got a character sheet. I
Okay.
know when Gygax tried it, he was hiding behind like his filing cabinets in his basement. So there's this notion of you don't even see the guy behind the screen. It's almost a Wizard of Oz element to it because of that.
All right. So informal game it says when we got new material by Arneson, we published it with very little research on it. Our plan was to let others review and publish it. Right on, man. I
Mhm.
wish everybody did that. I know I've got some buddies that are big into like the old wargaming, and it's very hard to get your hands on some of those rules. You know, some of the original, like the Strategos variants that the Blackmore bunch were coming up with, and
Right, like Strategos N. Mhm.
yeah, Strategos N, and they had one for the Ancients. Was it Strategos A, and the N was Napoleonics.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get Strategos. I think it's out there somewhere, like the original one that kind of inspired them.
Yeah, I found a PDF of it online, so not too difficult to get a hold
Yeah.
of there. Because Totten, a lot of his stuff is based off of statistics from the Civil War. So
Mm-hmm.
it's got a lot of value just to show how you have a science of war becoming the case in the 19th century, because that entire period is defined by advances in the sciences. And even though
Yeah.
it winds up being the case that late in the 19th century winds up killing the humanities because they want to be sciences as well, um, it gives us wargaming as a hobby because everything is set up by a ratio. It is then set on this little table. It has its dimensions. You then know who's doing what for how long because time really does matter in there. When I was doing my read through of Kriegspiel as much as I
Yeah.
could, every little move is equal to 2 minutes because it is literally simulating being a commander. This hobby is born of blood and guts,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
fun.
Right on, man. And I can't remember. Griff, remind me if it was something that Kuntz said. Here's the thing: you guys don't realize when we do a Dundermoose show, like
Mhm.
we put all the value on the screen, and then we cut, and then often there's a whole conversation that happens afterwards. And I'm like, oh, this should have been an episode in of itself. So somebody, I think it was Kuntz, pointed out,
Yeah.
the guys that built this hobby, they were very much looking at getting drafted and going to Vietnam. Right.
Oh
So
yes.
it wasn't just a nerdy war game hobby for them. Like this is something where it's like I need to be able to practice some skills that I have no control over whether I'm going to absolutely need this stuff. I'm going to need to know about high ground and enfilade and defilade, and I'm going to need to know about the stuff that may help me get home to see my family for Christmas. And so I think it just adds another layer of intensity onto it that us
Hmm.
comfortable, oh so sure of ourselves, making all these declarative statements, gamers in this day and age, we really need to remember who those guys were and what they were up against before we come off all judgy about who they were and how they acted in their time. So that's kind of one of the things I
Yeah,
was talking about with like understand the time period before you go judging it by your own.
yeah, and somebody might want to point out that, 19th century warfare simulations are going to be good for Vietnam, but you
Yeah.
start thinking in those particular wargaming methods of what do I need, where do I need it, how long is it going to take. So those
Hmm.
skills can be at least said to be transferable. We've actually got something from Griff here in the chat about publication citations.
Yes.
That's already being done. In my book, everything is being done by Chicago manual style. So you just go to the back, you'll find it. There'll be a full bibliography in the back. We're not
Right
going to
on.
do, what's the guy's name? Luke Hart. Dude published some stuff and didn't credit Jeffro or the Brosar for concepts
Oh,
or the whole one-to-one time. That's very recent.
yeah.
If there's one thing
Well,
we're also going to try to do in this hobby, let's be honest about where these ideas come from.
yeah.
Let's cite, because then guess what? We don't have to then figure out what went back by trying to find an implication in a source. Little Hansel and Gretel here, the two of us can go back and find it.
That's right. That's right. Why do you think there are people that get interested in this stuff and don't they just want to tell the stories however they hear them, and they don't want to fact check it and like be rigorous about. Since we're dealing with history, you'd think that would be like part of the base set. Do your research.
I mean, in the first, they're not exactly trained for it, so they might not even think about it. In the second, are they trying to cite correctly and try to be technically correct, or are they making content? They're making content, so they need to have this fast. They need to have some notion about stuff, and then because of the breakneck pace they try to produce that kind of stuff, they'll run roughshod over concepts or ideas and not credit somebody. And because of that, who knows? Maybe somebody watched that YouTube video and think, "Oh, okay, so this Luke guy just read the DMG 1E for the first time and found this thing, and he thought it was cool, and he did it." When there's in fact this big movement because of the Bro-SR to actually push for those kinds of rules.
Yeah.
Because, just like I mentioned in Creeksfield, you know, you do every turn by 2 minutes because it's supposed to simulate an actual war.
And especially just to address that whole thing, a lot of people are like, man, why are the bros so harsh about this? Why does everyone have to do the hashtag and stuff? And it's like, for people that have been there since they started trying to recreate these ideas, like, I just want you to picture that you read it for yourself and you're like, okay, well, that sounds hard, but we're going to try it. And you got your buddies to try it and you convinced them to, and then it transformed your game and you got all excited about it. And then you came out to tell everyone how awesome it was, and it was just a wave after a wave after a wave of negative ankle biting. That doesn't work. Nobody ever does that. You can't do that. Oh, we always did that. You never came up with any, like, they just got buffered and beat down, you know. And, you know, I just came out and said, hey, I'm interested in what you guys are doing. And I started taking lefts and rights on it, you know. So it's like to go through all that for 3 or 4 years, right? And then to have someone go, hey, guess what I just discovered? You can do 1-to-1 time and it's great. And then everyone's like, yeah, yay, that's great. And you got these guys over here holding a steak on our eye going, oh yeah, good idea. You know, like, so I don't know if that helps or if I just made it worse. Griff says,
no, it illustrates the issue.
All dozen Bro-SR. Hey guys. I don't think Griff's a big fan of the Bro-SR. I'm glad Griff and I are friends. I don't know why we're friends. My friends don't get along with his friends, but there's just something. I don't know. Maybe it's my approach. Maybe something like that. My whole thing is like, okay, you say you got a better way. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to give you the chance to show me and teach me, and I want to play a better game. Have a good night, Griff. Thanks for being in the chat.
Later.
You can watch us on the replay. Hopefully I don't enrage you too much.
Actually, Bradford Walker's got a fantastic comment up above. Okay, so it says a little bit above
is this
that.
The one? Oh.
Also a trained historian. Guys, this is a hobby that self-selects for super nerds who really enjoy reading this stuff, who are interested in the people who did it and thinking in the way in which they thought, right?
Yeah.
So I had to talk earlier about, Jefferson trying to get some extra language into the Declaration of Independence. Well, what if, say, we're doing a game of diplomacy, right? Because even though I don't think that's a war game from my perspective, they thought it was in the 1970s. So what I think doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are they doing? They are saying we're going to play a game of diplomacy. It's either going to be face to face, or more likely it's going to be by mail. And what do? They may call each other. They may write official letters. Actually, do to His Most Christian and Catholic Majesty Charles V of Spain.
Yeah, you get into it. You're role playing as you're writing.
You are role playing the entire time.
Yeah.
And again, you are thinking as a general. You're thinking as that little guy who is on the table who represents you, right? And it says that in basically every miniatures war game. I play Warhammer: The Old World a lot, and I love it to death.
Yeah.
And because of that, you are doing role playing. You are thinking in the manner, in Quomodo, of that guy.
Yeah.
And it's you at the same time.
And there's so much overlap, right? Like I got a buddy. Yeah. He was the one that actually came over and looked at my my panel. But back in the day, he used to do Civil War reenactment. And I asked him, I was like, man, that's such an interesting hobby. What is it about that? Like, what is the high that everyone's chasing? And he says, everyone's trying to have their moment. And he says that it happens. It doesn't necessarily happen for everyone, but if it hits you, like, that's the thing. And he said him and his guys had marched forward across this valley, and the other guys were over the hill. And he was trying to reload. And his buddy grabbed him by the shoulder. He's like, we got to go. And he's like, hang on a second. And he's like, no, we got to go. and he looked up and he saw them all running towards him. And he said in that moment, he wasn't a dude in a hobby. He was there and he saw the charge and he got up and ran for his life. And he said, that was what I was playing for. And I was like, oh man, there's so much overlap between these different hobbies. They all like circle around this warlike getting, and I've been painting some Space Marines here.
Oh, there you go. What you got there?
Oh, this is
what chapter?
Oh, the my guys are the Dark Angels.
Dark Angels, awesome.
Yeah, those guys are. I just primed them in black. So,
I actually had a Deathwing army when I played in college. Loved it.
Oh, nice.
And,
but like even playing little skirmish games, like if you just have one guy, like I had one, I was this is like back in the 90s. I was playing the orcs, and I had the box set, and it just came with orcs, Gretchens, and then Space Marines. They all had like their guns like held at their chest. And
I actually like those old poses anymore because it's easier to put on the board.
They're so good. And I had one Gretchen that somehow survived a hand-to-hand combat with a Blood Angel. What are the guys that they're all painted black and they got like the blood rage on them?
Death Company?
Death Company.
Oh, yeah.
I had one Gretchen that went toe-to-toe with a Death Company Marine and just through insane rolling put the guy down. And those guys they were the only ones that had 2 wounds back then, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like, I got to decorate this model. And like I shaved the spike off his head. We called him Baldy Bill. And like the role playing just naturally, like all of a sudden I was like thinking about the world through Baldy Bill's perspective, and like, were they going to make him an honorary orc because he was such a tough little guy? I don't know. Anyway,
they probably punted him and ate him.
Yeah, yeah. Or put him in a
Game's making us look bad.
Put him in a dreadnought. Something.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, the wargaming and the role playing, it just naturally leads to each other. I think if you play long enough.
Yeah, and that wound up getting melded in Arneson's imagination.
Bradford Walker with another banger. Few people realize that we argue about elf games because Prussia had to find a way to cope with what Napoleon did to them during his reign. Weird, but you can draw the connections.
Absolutely.
Right on. So
I've actually got a couple of books. I just got them in, so
do it.
With what I've been writing, I've just been doing a little bit of an overview of Kriegsfield. But I got Chris Duffy's book in about Prussia and their army. Then I just got in Dr. Alexander Burns' book on infantry battle in basically the 18th century.
Okay.
So I'll be using that also as kind of preliminary material to where, all right, when you look at, say, a game of chainmail or Kriegsfield or whatever, everything's in blocks. Okay, why are they in blocks? Because it's actually effective. Not everybody is going to be doing that dumb shit in the Patriot where they're hiding behind the trees all the time. They're picking guys off and all that stuff. Because that's not how the American Revolution was fought. Even though, we think differently.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's like one of those like movie win buttons, right? Like it's like we always see like the jet that decides that they're going to fly through the canyon.
Yeah.
They're such a good pilot. And it's like in the movie that always works. But in real life, you could just get some altitude and watch them risk their life the whole time and then just shoot down on them from above, right? Like
it's the Millennium Falcon thing, right?
Yeah, the win button, the thing that you can do that the other guy can't, and you outfly them or whatever. Yeah. So, but yeah, if you're talking about guns that don't have a fast rate of fire, just having a big broadside, everyone letting loose at once is going to be more accurate than you shooting from behind a tree, running, pouring your horn down the front.
Well, from what I've read, they could actually fire a few rounds per minute once they're properly trained, which is faster than I thought, honestly.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought it'd be like, 1, maybe 2 if you're good, but no, it seems to be faster from what I've been reading so far.
Interesting. All right, so you're doing some research. Is there, like, what is your is alarms and excursions? Is that your unicorn right now? What's the data set that you're looking at to help you patch some of the holes for what you're writing?
Well, A&E winds up being a pretty good trove because it gives us, I'm going to call it the LA reception at D&D. And I've only just started reading it beginning yesterday. So what I got out of reading the first couple issues is that, first off, just like today, people don't read. And if they read, they don't read it well.
Yeah.
So in that first issue, they have a lot of stuff about mages, magic users. And people talk about, I don't want to have a single spell per day. I want to have this system where he gets extra spells so he can go down and stay longer in the dungeon. So they come up with a homebrew for that. And then I saw this crazy thing about mages actually wearing armor and using weapons. And I've actually got that absurdly large Making of OD&D book, and I opened it up to the page where it talks about the magic user, but it says can only have a dagger. But then
Yeah.
I think for just a moment, wait, that's just like in Final Fantasy 1. He can only have that dirk. Wow, there's extra stuff here. So
Hmm.
with A&E, it's really interesting because it services as a forum, and if you've ever actually been on a forum, you know exactly the kind of talk that is going to happen. You got guys blasting each other on the pages.
Oh
You've got
man,
your
some of that's
Gygax sending in
hilarious.
some information and even addressing the fact that if you really want some authority on D&D, you've got to go to the strategic review. Oh, Malachi actually has a really cool thing. I think Crafty Matt mentioned this at one point that Final Fantasy One was an OD&D clone,
Huh.
and I gotta admit, I like a Final Fantasy with spells per day. I really enjoy that because it limits what you can do, and also now all of a sudden your decisions have a lot more importance than just I'm gonna go grind out a bunch of ethers and I'm just gonna go do whatever, guys. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Well, and there's in 1E there's like things about, if your mage just wants to sit up in his tower crafting spells,
Hmm.
they can do that, but they're not going to get to play again for 6 months, right? So that's where the one-to-one timekeeping, that's the payoff. It's like, okay, if you want to just take yourself out of the fight and give yourself a bunch of I win button scrolls,
Hmm.
you're certainly welcome to do that, but you're going to be rolling a different guy up and playing him in the meantime, because that's going to take long enough that there is a balance to it, right?
Yeah, I can slightly piggyback on with that with a ridiculous situation I wound up with my Rise of the Drow campaign. I was
Okay.
talking about it a little bit before the show. My guys had decided they wanted some downtime, okay, because they had just been made barons. They bought the
Hmm.
baronies because it's a corrupt kingdom and all that. And they decided they were going to have their mage train up a small school of first level wizards, okay? And then those first level wizards are going to craft first level scrolls for them all day, every day. So
Oh,
they wind up creating a magical sweatshop
yeah.
that they then fund, that they have underneath the very nose of the Mages College. And eventually, because one of the guys got himself a little school in his barony, he just quietly moved everybody out there. So, because they're working on this stuff, because we were using some domain rules, and because all of a sudden they have dozens of scrolls,
Yeah.
the game changes kind of fundamentally because they're thinking in different ways. Had they taken
That's
every first
hilarious.
level mage there and brought them with them on some adventure, you'd have like 30 kids, and because of the rules that we were using when it comes to like extra stuff, they could have scrolls of shield to just hand off to somebody, or scrolls of magic missile to kill all kinds of stuff.
So you got like the kid just carrying all his paper, just like
Hmm.
a bushel of scrolls.
Yeah, it's got like a bandolier,
Yeah, he's like a
right?
caddy. He's like a caddy,
Hmm.
but instead of golf clubs, he's got scrolls to hand you. No, not
Yeah,
that one,
and
boy. The other
unfortunately,
one. That's hilarious.
because of how Fireball works in Fifth Edition, I can't just blow that shit up and the scrolls are gone.
Yeah.
As opposed to say 1E, where you're calculating out the volume of a sphere in a dungeon,
Yeah.
which I've not really played 1E yet, but I read that and it warmed my heart
Oh yeah. Well,
because
that
of life
happened to me the
lessons.
last time I played 1E. We were in a tunnel that had a cave in, and we had cleared out part of it. And there was a ton of was it orcs or goblins or somebody on the other side. And my wizard Bumblebore has just leveled up to 5 and has access to the fireball spell. And so I cast it, and then it was like, okay, here's the volume, and we were trying to figure out. And yeah, basically, I didn't even think. I just cast it. It came the fireball blew back to just right, like just enough to singe my beard. If it had been
Oh my god.
one more, 5 foot or whatever, if it one more square, I would have
Mhm.
totally gotten the full bore of the fireball as well. So I was like, okay, note to self: that meme about saying I don't care how big the room is, like that's not just a joke. You got to take that crap in there. You got to do some
Yeah,
math
you actually have
before
to
you
think.
let one of those off indoors. Um, so yeah,
With
and I'm
that,
not sure. Fluid the Druid player Brian Renninger, he's been playing a thief named Slippery Pete, and at one point, Slippery Pete was was getting in some trouble with the party because we got like a paladin and a ranger in the party, and so he's like tried to change his tune, and he became Pete the Pious, and he was raising money for an orphanage for wayward boys, and I'm like, I'm sure there's some kind of scheme like that where he's gonna sweatshop him into doing something to boost his character one way or the other. And
It's actually
honestly,
a thief guild.
yeah, I'd be disappointed if that's not what happened. So the Artful Dodger and all that. Bradford says, I'm of the mind that there is room for articles explaining how to play various classes properly now that just so lore has proven inadequate. Right on. And Bradford, you've got some of those. If you go back on Walker's Lakeside Retreat, he went through some of the if not all of them, subclasses and talked about where their strengths are and how you should play them and that kind of stuff. Worth a read for you guys to go back and look at that stuff. It's kind of like the 5e book that calls the monsters know what they're doing,
I've
and
heard
it
of
has
it.
like he basically he looks at the rules and extrapolates how they would fight based on what they're good at and what they're not.
Yeah,
Like he says, goblins would be shoot and scoot. Like they'd be the ones behind the tree shooting once and then running for it because they've got maneuvers that let them hide and stuff. They wouldn't do a straight up fight, like maybe hobgoblins would or something.
and that's a weird thing they didn't port over from fourth edition was this notion of you could actually talk about tactics in the stat block or in the
Yeah,
description. Even if you don't like how they separate everything out to where they had a battlefield role, it made encounter building pretty easy.
yeah.
So you could just get into it really.
I've
But
never played 4e, so I have no idea what you're talking about. But that's
well, it was
just
a weird
'cause
situation. So I came into the hobby in 3.5 because
okay.
we had played
Sounds like a
D&D for the
hot
first
time
time.
to have come into the hobby, right? Like that's
I,
right before.
yeah, it's just it's weird in retrospective because I know a little bit now.
Hmm.
But it was for my youth group, and we were just playing in my friend's garage. And it was
Right
literally
on.
just a scenario where my friend was wanting to show how the game worked. He popped us into the town and said, "What do you want to do?" I went over to this dwarf smith shop, and I got my toe bitten off because it didn't speak Dwarven. One of my friends went into a side alley, met Michael Jackson. It was pickling the time, guys. Certain
Yeah,
jokes were what
yeah,
flew.
yeah.
Um, but I wound up enjoying it. We kept playing, and that's how I started dungeon mastering because I got the books, and then I ran stuff in college. But then fourth edition came out. I was like, all right, I'll try this, and I ran it. It was okay. Not as terrible as people make it out to be. It's very much just a kind of board game, effectively.
Okay,
But I actually did have a game that was nothing but girls, so I will take that, put it in my non-existent cap
there you
atop my
go.
bald head, and I'll just keep that there forever.
Well,
But
speaking
as
of,
far
oh,
as
I'm
I'm
sorry.
concerned, it's the easiest when it comes to just getting into dungeon mastering and using monsters,
Oh,
right?
so it's because yeah, I've heard 3 to 5 is really crunchy, and so 4 sounds like it
Very
was like so streamlined that maybe it honked
too
off all the
streamlined.
crunchers.
It's weird when intelligence adds to your armor class. That was
No,
the
that
thing.
one goes there. This one goes here.
Hmm.
Oh,
But
don't
yeah,
put
the scaling proficiency that just adds to your skills and your saves to where,
you got a dude walking around with a cod piece for a pauldron. How
mhm.
come I keep getting a hit in the shoulder? Anyway, it's an intelligence thing. But your point about the girls, um, Gary's comment that he still takes flack over. Um, I feel like females were always a part of the hobby from the very beginning, right? Like
Have
there's
been
always at least one or two.
Blackmore Bunch.
Yeah,
And then most recently, I learned Andre Norton, the fantasy author, who I really hadn't heard about until I started looking to Quack Keep,
yeah.
wrote the first D&D fantasy book set in Greyhawk. She played with Gygax, I think in 1975 or 76.
Okay.
And I'm going to show you something, guys. If Gygax is a terrible sexist, he ain't letting a girl just sit at the table and play the game. Okay?
Yeah.
Because there are things that boys do slash men do and things that girls do slash women do. Okay.
Hmm.
None of us are old enough, right? Battleship, you seen the original box, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so what's happening?
It's got
Dad
a
and
couple.
son, it's after dinner,
Yeah.
they're playing at the
The men are
table.
playing and the women are washing dishes and kind of looking over their shoulder like, oh, those boys. Boys will be boys.
Right. Oh yes.
Yeah.
But in contrast to that, Gygax has at least one female at his table. His kids played, including his daughter. And one of the girls, I believe, is said to have suggested the name Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Okay.
I'd have to go back and check some of my sources on that. But
Lumper Wizard says removing women was an innovation of the Broasar.
Ew, Sausage Fest, really? No, D&D should be like a court. It's not the same without women. You need to have at least some. Otherwise,
Dungeons and Dragons, less sexist than Battleship.
It's not a bad tagline.
Yeah.
Women can play this game because they have imaginations. Did you know that in the Latin language, mens, which refers to the mind, is a feminine word, and words which deal with the mind are considered feminine? Sorry, I've also
that's why I stopped thinking a long time ago. I'm just kidding. I do feel like there's certain women that would absolutely rather do the dishes than play Battleship with me. So I'll just put that out there.
Sure. Yes, but what we're talking about is you don't have to be pigeonholed or shoved into a particular role.
Yeah.
Do you want to play D&D? Sure. Do you not want to play the game? Sure. Cool. Hey, do what you want.
But so getting back to what you were saying about the whole the forum type behavior, and we see it on Twitter way stronger. Well, I don't know, maybe as you're reading,
we see it more frequently as opposed to like once a month.
Maybe as you're reading A&E, you're like, no, it's the exact same behavior. But there comes a time when somebody has said something about you that is so ridiculous that it is more fun / better tactically to just agree and amplify as a sign of derision than to try to fight for your own innocence. And I think that might have happened with Gary, where they were like, oh, you're just sexist. And instead of saying, I have some of my best friends are women, you just lean into it and just let them have it with the broad. And I think that's may have been what happened. And he wasn't claiming something in honesty. He was engaging in a back and forth, right?
Yeah, the medium right, Wilbur. He does that kind of a bit where he just goes hard into what people not expecting, and it winds up being really funny.
Yeah. There was one of the masters
is actually read it out loud if you'd like, because I've got it ready right here. Just on my screen,
do it. Let's judge for ourselves, shall we? Leave it to the historian to take us to the source.
Okay, so guys, Europa 6-8. What's the lady say? Men have this need, this desire to conquer territory, and this territorial imperative is what drives them to do these things. Now, also keep in mind as I check this out, Gygax has also been personally confronted about women in the game. Why aren't there things for women in this game? Yeah. Now, those of you who actually play OD&D know that there are like no rules for sex in that game, period. There's no difference because guess what? You can play Dark Agnes, you can play whoever, even though Red Sonja hadn't been invented yet. So this is Gary Gygax's response in the next issue of Europa. I've been accused of being a nasty old sexist male chauvinist pig, but the wording in D&D is what it should be. There should be more emphasis on the female role, more non-gendered names, and so forth. I thought perhaps these folks were right and considered adding women in the raping and pillaging section in the Whores and Tavern Witches chapter, the special magical part dealing with hags and crones, and thought of perhaps adding an appendix on medieval harems, slave girls, and going Viking. Damn right I am a sexist. It doesn't matter to me if women get paid as much as men, get jobs traditionally male, and shower in the men's locker room. Isn't that ridiculous on its face, right?
Seriously.
They can jolly well stay away from wargaming in droves for all I care. I've seen many a good war game and war gamers spoiled thanks to the fair sex. I'll detail that if anyone wishes. So, he is being sarcastic, he's being snarky, because this is also how people write in these magazines. There's a lot of snark going on, especially rules interpretations. We keep talking about the Blackboard documentary. They would argue for like a long time over a rules interpretation because the game demands that you know what's going on at a particular junction, which is also why having a judge or referee is essential in these things. But it's also a bit of a problem because you have to read the damn rules, and somebody has to read them.
Yeah. Well, I have noticed, and maybe this is just circumstantial evidence. There was I need to tell a little bit about myself to just tell you why I was such a jerk in this scenario. But I got addicted to video games. I was playing a game called Destiny, and I just got hooked on it.
I thought you were gonna say WoW.
No, it's the same kind of thing. It's like WoW and Halo had a baby, is what Destiny is.
Yeah.
And we went to go visit my in-laws up north, and they have like no internet and barely electricity. And I was so hooked on it, the dopamine hit, staying up too late on a weeknight when I had work the next day, and just shameful. But the world had lost a lot of its color, and so I was just bored and angry and grumpy. And my brother-in-law and his wife came up, and they had a board game, and we were playing it, and like I was getting my fix through that. And his wife wanted to play by some different rule than what was in the book, because that's just how she's always played it, because she didn't understand it the first time she read it. And he's just been like, okay, well, I'm just happy my wife's playing with me. We'll use that rule. That's our house rule. Right. And I could not get around it. I could not get over it. I was like, this is the rule that says in the book. I should be able to depend on that to make the moves that will give me a chance to win the game. And so I'm not taking anything away from I was not in a good place in my head, right? And I was putting way too much on this one game. So I was being that guy. But I feel like if you are that guy, you are going to, how do I put this? You'll come across more females that will want to go along to get along, or play with an easier rule just to make sure everyone's having fun, than males who would be willing. If like I have no doubt that it was just him and me playing that, we would have played by the rules. Because if he'd have tried to do some of that, I'd have been like, no, what are you talking about? Look, right here on page 4. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But because she was like, no, I want to play it this way. And then he was like, okay, sweetie. And then I was just like, fuming. So that's not a good example, because I was clearly in the wrong, because I was, I don't have the problem anymore. I've probably replaced my addiction with D&D, honestly. But they say if you once you get rid of one, there's something else going to step in. I'm still working on me, guys. I'm still working on me. But the point is, it may be just because humans, like males and females, are different, the way our brains work and the way that is, that if you're talking about games, especially ones where it's fun to argue about the rules and it's fun to get to the bottom of it, I think that maybe self-selects stronger for male than for female. I'm not saying all or nothing. I just think that like dudes are more interested in arguing about the rules than women are. They just want to make up something so everyone can get along and keep playing. We
can definitely call it a central tendency.
Yeah.
And there's a statistic in playing at the World 2E that I think helps bear out your point.
Okay.
The wargaming hobby was estimated to be 99%, okay, middle class and upper class white males, okay?
Yeah.
Oh, and 1% is everything else. So you do have women, you do have non-white dudes playing, but it's this tiny, tiny minority. And one of the things that does come up, partially because of this quote from Gygax, is, all right, it is the 70s. You were trying to get a company off of the ground, okay? You got these people who are just coming at you, literally coming at you, broadsiding you, and they're saying, we need to have rules for women in this. Why aren't there? Where are the women? Where are they? Are you going to try to sell to the 99% or to the 1% as a businessman, okay?
That's right.
You know your audience. You're going to try to put it out there. And then we know in Dragon number 3, there's that article about notes on women in magic and whatnot. And what's the reception then of that? Oh, that's just further confirms these people are terrible. So really, there's no forgiveness. Yeah. There's no respite. There's only war.
That's right. Blood for the blood god.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, so yeah, I don't know. Do people get in trouble nowadays for saying the same kind of stuff Gary did, or are we just so conditioned that if you say something like that, if you go on a diatribe like what I just did, you like the banhammer's coming for you? Like, this may be my last YouTube episode. Thank you guys for the memories.
I mean, look, I recently learned that a while back, several years, somebody came at Frank Mincer. It was a woman. She said that he had made certain advances and she made certain accusations, but there was really no evidence for it, and nothing was really done to prove that he had done these things. Yet, he still suffered the consequences of it. That, I believe, is in fact changing, especially if we're going to try to get into a spot where in this hobby we can treat each other a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay? Have a little bit of grace, okay? Don't go for the worst interpretation of everything. And just remember, we are here to play games by the rules. And so, because of that, we're here. There is a list, okay, of things that we're going to play by. We're going to follow those, and if we have to, we'll talk about why we think one thing is true, one thing is false. I mentioned that I play the old world. I'm the guy who reads the rules. I get the books, I look at them again, I study them. When there's a rules question, they call me over from the table,
Yeah.
and I make the call. Okay, it's not always correct, but also I have a little book. It's not a book of grudges, but it is in fact a little notebook of what I need to check after each time that we play, because those rules are so complicated. But that's also why it's really fun.
Yeah. And the thing is I learned this from playing chainmail with some of the bros, is you can read the book, but you won't really understand the game until you play it and start bumping into those edge cases where you have to look at how is the rule written, what was the likely intent of the person writing the rule, and have you reached a place where the rules are silent where you need to homebrew, which I
Yeah,
think it's fine to rule zero if you've hit a scenario that is not adequately covered. For
yeah,
everything
because
else,
it's
there's
also
rules
something
as
in the
written.
judge's journal, because Macros talks about precedent, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, he's a lawyer. He has to bring up this kind of
Yeah.
stuff because those concepts are useful, though. Okay, as
Hmm.
a club, my old world guys, we have decided that we're going to adopt something called the Renegade Errata. Okay, it's this PDF of small changes to what are called the legacy armies. It makes them a little bit better, but it
Yeah.
also stops me from doing shenanigans with my vampire accounts that I was wanting to do. We adopted it. I can't do that anymore. And so, because of that, if you want to play a certain army, it's a little bit better. It's a little bit more in line with the new stuff, and it
Yeah.
makes for a better gaming experience overall.
But it can
Now,
be frustrating if you had something really special planned and now you can't do that.
I did, but I also want guys to have fun.
Yeah.
I played Tournament 40K. I really enjoyed that back when I
Oh,
was in
okay.
college in 5th edition. So that was my jam, and I was also the guy who read the rules. So I don't mind that kind of a thing, because if you say we're going to play a game competitively,
Yeah.
you know what the stakes are. You're going to do everything you can to win, okay?
Yes.
But
Yes.
if it's a casual game night, look, bring some good stuff. You don't have to bring your killer, 2,000 point tournament killer list, that kind of a thing. You're there to have a good time. Now, one of the points that I'm really trying to grill Peterson over is the fact that this response in Europa, which was in the very next issue, he glosses over until he brings it out to lambast the dragon number 3-4, which is
Hmm.
like later, okay? Um, in the citation, in the back of it, he says that, well, we got to remember that Gygax, in response to this lady saying a thing a while back, um, he made the statement, he's a terrible sexist, and we need to keep that in mind, implying that he was the guy who was controlling the dragon at that time. If you
Hmm.
have the tiniest interest on the history of the dragon, you will know that Tim Cass said to Gygax, because he was preparing himself to go get his degree to then run the magazine, I want editorial independence. We're not just going to be a house organ.
Yeah.
And Gygax agreed to it because Tim Cass is that damn good. And because of that, it's not Gygax, it is Tim Cass making that decision. Tim Cass is making that decision because this guy wrote these rules. You don't have to agree with them. I don't think I'd use them. But if people are saying, well, we need rules for women, well, here are some rules, and they get pissed off about it
Yeah.
because it's another thing to get angry over.
Yeah.
So you've got these multiple instances here of Peterson, how do I characterize it in my original article? Misconstruing evidence, skipping it over, and then twisting things to fit the narrative, right? He begins
Yeah.
with this conclusion. He doesn't ask the right questions. And then because of that, you wind up with this book that sets it up to where he gets to be the authority, but you don't rediscover what was going on in the 1970s at that time.
You just
Tim Cass
discover how
doesn't exactly
everyone.
like that article anymore, and you don't have to. It's decades later, but there was an attempt made.
Yeah.
Whether or not it actually had a good reception is another thing.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, so you don't get the nuance of what was meant in the time. You just get how are you supposed to feel about this now, or else you're a bad person. It's
Yes, and
almost
that kind of
it's
moral authority
almost a
is
purity test where it's like if you don't throw Gary under the bus, you're just as bad as he is.
because it's the company line. That's why he got to write along with who's
Hmm.
that fat guy in the opening to the OD&D making a book that well, this was a certain time period and people were
Yeah.
bad and they were worse off, and they just keep doing that dumbass line, and then just like they put at the end of all the PDFs of
Malachi says
these old
Riggs.
adventures, I
Ben
wasn't
Riggs, is that the
Riggs.
one?
Yeah, I might go get that book in just a second. But
Okay.
it's that stupid disclaimer about, hey, these were old attitudes. They were wrong then. They're wrong now. But if you give us money, we'll still sell that shit to you. Because they don't care about Gygax. They don't care about Arneson. They don't care about any of the writers. They want your dollars.
They
Okay?
want it, and they're going to use their stuff, but they don't want to get up against the wall when the revolution comes. They want everyone to know, hey, no, I'm one of the good guys. You can trust me. I'm interested in this, but I'm still on your side. You know, it's
It's safe. It's safe. Okay, look, I've
I'm
got the disclaimer. This is safe.
I'm a
Which actually,
star-bellied sneech. I am not one of those sneeches that doesn't have a star on his belly. So,
Tandro,
um,
thank you.
yeah, Jason Tandra. Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
actually, funnily enough, my entire AD&D 1E collection began because of the controversy over Oriental Adventures, right? To where
okay,
that Daniel Kwan fellow was just whining and crying, and then they brought him on staff, and then he got mad because he had to have an editor. But I was looking at that, and because I like to have sources available, I decided, well, what if I just get this book? What if it disappears? Okay, what if they get rid of it online?
yep,
Or as would happen with Bolos, if you had a digital version of it, they edited it without your permission, despite
they
you buying that
edited.
product.
Oh
Yeah,
wow,
yeah, because they took out lore for beholders, lore for mind flayers, and it just wound up being inferior because of that. But I've gradually been able to get a decent 1E collection because of it,
hmm
and should the occasion ever require it, I can refer to it. I can play it if I want to. And just like we were talking about with the digital archive, they can't take it away from me.
yeah, right on. So we've been a little harsh on Peterson tonight and some of his ilk. Is that your main complaint? Is just aside from what I mean, he's interested in the same stuff we're interested in, right? Like
Sure.
he's looking at the same time periods and the same materials we are. Um, what does he get right? Let's steelman him for a bit before we get more into the attitudes that we need to combat. Like what?
Yeah, he does a good job talking about the reception of D&D. In fact, one of the main points in playing at the World 2E is the relationship between TSR, say the Strategic Review, and all these
Mhm.
fanzines that were being written at the time of being published, okay? And the guy has read thousands of these. That's no small amount of work.
Yeah,
And so, because of that, you do get these sections about disputes going on in these different magazines that you would have no idea they were going on unless you actually did have access to that stuff to bring it back around to the beginning. My issue is with the interpretation and also with his theory of power and authority.
hmm.
Because if we have an infinite number of D&Ds, well, we're not really playing anything called D&D.
That's right.
Because even in A&E number one, they're talking about variants and different kinds of games. So, for example, most people know that you have different kinds of D&D going on over at Caltech. Okay, in
Hmm.
A&E number one, they're talking about calling that Dungeons and Beavers because the beaver is their mascot over there at that college, and it's
Okay.
described as being a more brutal version of the game, perhaps more brutal than actually OD&D is, which is terrifyingly brutal. But
Yeah.
it's also fun because of that, and which is also different from how they do things in the milieu of LA, which they talk about a fair amount. And there are also variations in there. And it's a ton of work. It's interesting at certain points, but I don't think it carries the kind of authority that Peterson's putting into it. But he's also trying to undermine the authority of Gygax and TSR by means of the book.
Hmm.
Because if it's the case that these fanzines actually have the authority, then that shifts. Okay, who gets to talk about it? The guy who has access to the fanzines gets that authority because he can then do the interpretation of it.
Yeah.
So I disagree on that point. And along with that, there's a bit of a weird thing that I don't think he addresses adequately. And it might be because he has what I've described as a progressive approach to the book. So he talks in the beginning about how he's looking for mainly differences in sex when it's in fact class that matters in this kind
Hmm.
of a hobby. Okay, you're talking about the post-war World War II wargaming hobby. It's going to be middle class guys who have an interest in history, who are
Yeah.
willing to buy the models, willing to paint them, and then willing to put them on the table and then play a game that can last for several hours. They talk about this also in the Secrets of Blackboard documentary, where they go into the basement. They're gone for like 12 hours or whatever,
Yeah.
and then there's
Yeah.
also a couple of rules disputes that get quite heated. So that is also something I'm going to dispute him over. but also he has done a fair amount of work. I just disagree with where it's going.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, yeah, not just buying the minis, but you're building a sand table. You know, like you
Oh yeah,
are
the sand table is
committed to that
considered the
hobby.
pinnacle of the entire thing. That's why Gary Gygax had one made in his house.
Mm-hmm.
Right, puts it down in the basement because then you can mold out Gettysburg if you want to do that,
Yep.
because they
You
would
can do
play
hills
Gettysburg. That's really
and
what got
valleys and
Gygax and Arneson into the hobby. And then because of that, you can just set it up however you want. You have infinite number of battlefields. It's
yeah.
incredibly heavy though. My God.
Oh, I'll bet, and a mess probably too.
hmm there's another thing I want to kind of address, because he doesn't really make distinctions between different regions in the U.S.
Hmm.
So, for example, the LA version of D&D seems to get pride of place, and
Is he from that area? Is that just
I'm not sure off the
natural
top of my
bias,
head. It
maybe?
could very well be.
Yeah.
I got this nagging notion that California as a region has kind of wanted to control the hobby for a long time. I don't know if it's true. I might just be paranoid because I'm a Midwesterner and D&D is a Midwestern thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to hold on to it too, but that's maybe my fault. So I'll have to look into that some more. So there's this homogeneity kind of in the hobby where it doesn't seem like you get too much into the weeds of there being these different regions and how they'd approach things.
Hmm.
So, for example, um, when it comes to the Twin Cities, generally it seems like they do like following the rules, but they will also experiment a lot, and that's why they're able to come up with these variants of different games. We talked about the different strategos. That'd be what strategoi in Greek, and because of
Okay.
that, they've got these different versions, and then they try it out, and then they iterate and change it because of that. Right.
Yeah.
So I'll have to go through the book again at some point because you have to let a certain amount of time pass before you go back and look with fresh eyes. I got to wonder if there's really anything from the East Coast because nothing
Hmm.
comes to the top of my head, but it might be because I'm focusing on the whole LA thing. So that
Yeah.
might be my issue there. Along with that, something else I want to really grill him for is this notion of toxic rhetoric in wargaming, because it's
Hmm.
also my opinion that John Peterson doesn't like wargaming, and that by not giving wargaming its due, he can then put all of the neat and fun things into the role player that comes out of the hobby eventually as a separate identity. And
Yeah.
because of that, you don't have to deal with what may in fact be a bit of a problem. So there's this notion that they come up with in, say, the pages of the general of these guys having Rommel syndrome, is what they call it. They perhaps go too far with how they think about themselves in the sub reality that they're creating at the game. Okay.
Yeah.
So while I'm willing to admit it's probably possible for a guy to go too far into it, if you're sitting down to play the North African campaign and you're not thinking as Rommel, at least to start off, then you're not really doing the role at that stage.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just trying to play out Patton, sure, that's perfectly fine because there's a book you can read. But you were also there to think, okay, as an exercise, this is not literally happening. What
Yeah.
would I do in the North African campaign, knowing what actually happened in the past? Now, you can say that's maybe kind of cheating, but it's also you playing a game.
Hmm.
I really don't get to play Axis and Allies that often. Last time I played it, I did play the Italians, so I got some stuff in North Africa. I've got very few ships because, I'm not too good. I threw everything at Egypt because since we're playing a dice game, I had a chance to cripple the British there because I was well aware that if they went west and they also had guys going east, I was going to get pincered, and then
Yeah.
Sicily's going to happen anyway. Then I'm screwed.
Yeah.
I was able
Yeah.
to cripple them. They could not get into Africa. I then controlled the Strait of Gibraltar, and we were able to keep them away. So then the Germans win.
Yeah.
So
Man,
there's
man,
also
I
that.
loved Axis and Allies back in the day. I had one game where I was England, and I just thought I'm going for it. And
Mm.
I shelled the beach. I landed my two guys. I can't remember what the northern province was in Germany, but I had to leave one behind, and so I sent one guy in by himself against Berlin, but he had
Wow.
moved everything against Russia. He didn't think anyone was going to try that. He still had three guys against my one.
Oh, so it's
And
kind of a Normandy, except the Germans were elsewhere.
yeah, the Germans were like going to crush Russia,
Mm-hmm.
and I shouldn't have won because it was just one dude. That,
Yeah.
I couldn't move any more than one force in because I had to leave one behind to hold the territory.
Yep.
And but again, kind of like Baldy Bill with the Gretchen, the dice just were in my favor, and I killed all of them. And I wasn't going to hold Berlin. They just immediately turned around and stomped on me. But I got all of his production units. I got all his money that round, and that he just
Oh,
took
the
all the
economic
sales out of them.
damage.
Yeah,
Yes.
because if you take over their capital, then you get all their money that
Mm-hmm.
they had at that moment. And so I
Oh,
did
with the
that,
pressure.
and he pretty much knocked his king over at that point. He's like, I'm done. I can't.
Yeah.
Good times, good times.
So you're telling me that if you went to, say, the Origins tournament in 1975, you wouldn't show up dressed as Montgomery? You wouldn't just
No,
go deep in that?
no.
No. Just have the guy
The
crossing you playing the other group is not going to come by, and they're not going to be in some horrific leather uniform with a certain little
No, they
icicle
wouldn't
thing.
be. They wouldn't
No.
be walking weird, and I would not be calling cookies biscuits. Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, there's also a weird thing I did notice this last time when I was going through playing at the World. I couldn't find any mention of Mary Jo Powell, Mary Jo
Hmm.
Gygax, Gary Gygax's wife, because I think there's a lot to be said for her role in these things in keeping the household together after Gary Gygax lost his job in 1970. Okay,
Yeah.
because he literally becomes a cobbler in his basement and he does these odd jobs just to try to keep the family afloat. And also, they had to, get on food stamps because they just didn't have enough. And she's got 5 kids, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about a family of 7 in the mid 70s. Okay, you've got all kinds of inflationary pressures, and this guy is trying to get his family out of that hole.
And they're not living in
And
a cheap town. They're living in like a resort town, right?
so
Like,
it's a resort town, but the cost of living was less than, say, Chicago, where his
oh,
job
okay.
was. Gygax had to hop on a train and commute like 2 hours one way, so four
Oh my
hours total, like
gosh.
each day. It's a lot of time on the train, but you get to read, you get to write, you can do some stuff. Okay, but when he actually plays the Blackmore game, he has this light bulb go off, right, and that's the spark. And eventually, he gets those notes, and then he starts writing it. Okay,
Yeah.
and that eventually gives us those 1,000 copies that gives us this hobby. And it also explains why he is so aggressive in these letters and trying to defend himself because, yes, he's worked for Beat on Games at this point.
Hmm.
Yes, they've had a little bit of success, but it is no way clear what TSR's future is going to be. Of
Yeah.
course, he's going to come hard at this. He's got to sell stuff. He has to defend himself because if you don't, you are not going to be seen as somebody who will stand up for what they want to do,
Yeah.
which is create a new version of this hobby. Kuntz calls it the 4th category, or at
Hmm.
least Gygax may have said that at some point. And because of that, we still have it to this day because of that tenacity. Okay,
Yeah.
because very obviously, at least in my opinion, a father of 5 in the 70s losing his job like that is definitely going to be a great blow to your pride. And when the chance comes to actually make something great, you are.
Yeah.
I hate using this phrase. You're not going to throw away your shot.
Yeah. Papa
You
Bear.
know, I had to reference Hamilton at some point tonight because in that material I sent you was me defending John Adams because of how he's depicted in that musical. They made
Yeah.
him exactly like.
I still haven't seen the music. I really should. Everyone loves it.
You can listen to it. It's okay. Just turn your brain off. Don't think too much. Just enjoy the music.
Okay. That's good
Yeah.
advice.
And,
Oh,
entertainment has become history because people don't read anymore.
yeah.
And it's also why people have trouble thinking things through because, it's just you sit at a screen all day, you look at things, you don't stop, collaborate, or listen.
Yeah. How has the things that you've been uncovering as you've been on this journey, how has it changed the way that you approach the game, either as a player or as a DM?
I've actually changed how I played the game a lot the last couple of years. But that's also because I'm on TBE's Gilded server,
Okay.
and the guys are always talking about these different things they're playing and how the things are done. So, I did not roll the dice in the open because so I always had to wait there, and there's that fraction of a moment where you think about, well, should I let this roll stand or not? And so I got out of that. So I throw
What ha-
dice quite
what
often.
has been the biggest change from doing that, would you say? Because I
Oh,
think that goes deeper than people realize.
Well, I would say it's the players knowing exactly what's coming their way, and I get to get in their faces when I actually roll well. I've
Yeah,
not rolled well for about 2 months now, so I'm really waiting for my turn to come up.
right.
Because
I
guess what? There's no nonsense behind the screen. That is the roll. You're
Yeah, the
taking it.
roll is the roll, and you
Yeah.
play it as they lie. The
Hmm.
thing that I think happens subconsciously when people fudge dice, I feel like the DM always feels like he gets away with it, kind of like a one-e thief. You roll that secretly, and they don't know. They always think, yeah, I moved silently or I hid in the
Which is,
shadow,
I
right?
love that.
Yeah, that's pretty
Because
good.
ever since I came into the hobby, it's like, well, you rolled like a 21. You
Yeah.
know the average of what these people are going to be doing around you, so you know you're doing pretty good.
Or
But
like
you
you
just got
roll
to
a
participate,
4 and then you're
right?
like, immediately you change what you're doing. And it's like you
Yeah.
wouldn't know that. Um, right. Well, if you as a DM, if you do that, they pick up on it, even if it's subconsciously.
Hmm.
And not only does it take a little bit away from the agency, but they come to expect it. And then if the dice are bad and something bad happens to them, it's not just random chance. Then it's your fault because you're not fudging it for me to let me win this. Do
Hmm.
you just want to kill my character? Are you trying like just that one change of saying these are going in the open and they're going to fall where they are and that what happens happens and you got to be okay if that means your character dies?
Hmm.
That sets up different expectations in the minds of the player where I feel like a lot of modern DMs have to deal with a player that gets mad at them for something that happens in the game. And I wonder how much of it is this expectation that the DM's going to always kind of be filing off the sharp edges or, you know, interpreting the results in such a way that they don't like you become as the DM, you become the source of their fun. And that is not a good thing because people get addicted to
Yes.
this game, right? And you don't want to be the pipeline that's keeping
Mhm.
them from. You don't want to be like my sister-in-law who turned me into like Oscar the Grouch, right? Over something stupid like follow a rule. So
Right.
maybe I'm
Right.
putting way too much onto this. Maybe I'm slathering it in more than it needs. But I feel like little decisions up front, like rolling in the open, sets the tone that says, hey, this is going to be a fair game. You need to learn how to get good at the game. You don't need to learn how to get good at me. I don't want to train my players to get better at manipulating me. I want to train them. And that, I think, is part of why I really love the concept of rules as written, or as my friend and yours, Crafty Matt, says, RTFM. Um,
Yes.
because you can't play a game that you can't get better at something you don't know the rules to. If everybody
Exactly.
agrees on the rules, then you can test your theories and you can see what happens and you can build up a knowledge of how the game works and you can become a better player. You can hashtag win at D&D. But if all you're doing is and hey, Joy Wargaming's in the chat. How's it going, John?
Howdy.
Uh, John Mollison points out if the game becomes can you read my mind, if it's Mother May I, he calls it, and he likens it to dealing with an abusive person in the family where it's like you just got to guess what they're thinking or you get a whooping. That may be a little bit harsh. You got to go watch his video on it because I mean, he does a better job of explaining it than I do. But yeah, there's a lot of subconscious stuff going on. If you decide my job is to make sure the story happens and guide the players along it, and I'm going to roll behind the thing, and if the dice don't agree with me, the dice are wrong, right?
I'm going
Am
to lay
I
that
off
on
on a limb
Mercer.
here? Have you seen that for yourself as well?
I know it's a thing in the hobby. I, for the longest time, just kind of observed it, followed some people, and just kind of saw how they were talking about the game and how they would do things. And, it's been a while since I've seen the fudging debate, but there's no fudging debate if you're not putting your
Yeah,
dice behind the screen, right?
yeah,
And unfortunately, because a company like Critical Role has to make money, it behooves them to actually make the most impact with their audience. The impact
yeah,
of their audience is going to be maximal drama with minimum effect. And
yeah.
because of that, their characters do not die. I actually watched the show for a fairly long time. I understood what it was going at. It
Hmm.
was basically a radio drama.
Yeah,
But eventually I got so bored with it, and I got really annoyed at one of the characters they had on as a guest that I just stopped watching, period.
yeah.
But you go back through the various campaigns and you go back and watch, I'd say the first two. I didn't watch much of the third one. Which characters really wind up permanently dead? I can't think of one off the top of my head because
Even
either
though
they
they
get
weep big
resurrected because they
tears
have
when it
resources.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And then this was the thing with the campaign, the second one. People flipped out because that Tiefling character died, Talison's character. And yet he wound up coming back and he was the final boss of the game. Woo, he's back. It was all planned from the beginning.
Yeah,
Woo.
yeah.
Like, no. To hell with that. He died. It was a bad role. And that's what you get.
Yeah.
Grow up.
Yeah. It's such a different game when you let go of that. And to me, like the internal stuff ruins the externalities. Like,
Right. And with that expectation of being an entertainer, okay, that
mhm.
puts way too much onus on the DM, okay? DMing is, in fact, my job. I've been doing it for 4 years this year. But guess what? I'm rolling in the open, bitch. And if it
Yeah,
comes out bad, you're getting,
you're
you know,
getting ganked. I
get
like what
yanked.
Negative Space here says. I stopped watching it when one of the characters pooped somewhere so he could cast Scry on it.
I've actually pitched that as a reason to not watch Critical Role because I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like, look,
That is
um,
terrible.
their first campaign is very close to my experience in D&D, at least initially. Body, disgusting, and
Mhm.
I actually think it's very fun, even with all the Monty Python references. But when you have that happening, that seems to go over,
Yeah.
okay, an acceptable ledge and just off and down into the muck, as
I
it
don't know
were.
what you guys are talking about. That sounds ridiculous to me, but I will say I started watching it because I was trying to learn how to play 5e.
Mhm.
And there is a very low amount of how to play per episode. There is each episode is hours and hours, and you get a lot of these guys are really good voice actors. These like the DM can just set up a scene and he just sits back and they'll just go
Yeah.
because they're into the acting. And that ain't me. Yeah,
Right.
first off.
Well, they're into the acting, but if you're playing D&D and people know that they can do stuff, quite often you as the dungeon master can sit back and they want to play. Okay,
Yeah.
they
Oh,
will
that's some of my
adjudicate later.
favorite moments is watching them scheme and plot when they come up against something like, "Oh,
Sure.
how are we going to handle
Mhm.
this?" And you sit back and watch watch what they come up with. That's fun. I love that.
Yeah, they would
Um,
do secret chats because they'd be like, we got to make sure he doesn't know what we're doing because he might come up with an idea against it. Okay,
yeah.
because at one point I had to come up with bank security because my players want to start just robbing fantasy banks, which was entertaining. It was fun because they
Yeah.
do like, I'm going to drill underneath and okay, well, you come across this security system, how you want to disable it, and they just
Oh,
go
yeah.
through all those steps, and then they walked away with a ton of cash. And this may
And they
sound kind of
earned
silly.
it.
They spent the money on road development,
Yeah.
like on borders of the Shire, basically.
Wow. That's interesting. Like we're just gonna steal a bunch of money and we're just gonna
We're just spending
develop
infrastructure. Yeah.
infrastructure.
Hmm.
Infrastructure, the board game. Um, yeah, but I felt like I really wanted them to be like, okay, roll initiative, and then turn to the camera and say, initiative is how we decide who goes first. Everyone rolls a d20 and adds their whatever bonus, and this is how we do. Like I wanted those little
Yeah.
moments, and it was like you got to listen hard just to even try to learn how the game is played. And I don't know, it wasn't what I wanted, and I feel like even the best theatrical D&D is a little bit lame and boring and cringe if you're not playing in it. It doesn't
You
hit
need
the
the whole
same.
table to buy in, right?
Yeah.
Because
Like
it's
I
what they
can
do
read a
on the
session
show. They,
report.
they kind of pull back and they let you do your scene, right?
Yeah.
Because you're
I
doing
can
theater at that stage.
I can read a session report and get into it and be totally entertained.
Hmm.
Like Mr. Wargaming, he's been doing a series of solo plays, one he called The Wolflands. And I recently posted on Twitter, I was like, this is my Critical Role. Because I watched this because he walks through how he's determining what choices he's going to make, how much money they have, and when they need to spend it, and all that stuff. Like to
Yeah.
me, that's what I wanted the other thing to be. Um, but for the most part, I think actual plays are. I don't know. There is one that I listened to. It was a podcast. It was for a session of Numenera, and the guy had all people from Second City, and like those guys were hilarious. Just all these
Hmm.
improv comedy actors. Like that was fun to listen to. But again, it didn't teach me how to play Numenera.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
oh, hey Malachi, I agree. He says Scudder for Mike solo plays are Chef's Kiss. Yeah, he does a great job too. Um,
I've not seen those. I'll have to look them up.
okay, yes, I
Yeah.
called him Scooty Mike to start with because I thought it was Scootifer because I was thinking like
Oh,
Lucifer.
yeah, yeah.
But no, it's Scuddifer. I'm sorry, dude. You were on a roll, and then I am so distractible lately. I feel like our
Okay.
conversation's been kind of far ranging.
It has to be because we're talking about a 50-year hobby that began in
That's right.
1824.
That's
Right?
right.
In some sense, we're talking 200 years. So I keep jumping back to the American Revolution. We're going all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So part of the joy of what you're doing is just for uncovering the actual historicity of it and knowing what truly happened from multiple points of view, so that we can picture a better view. To me, like, I'm interested in that up to a point. In the point is, how can it make my game better now? How can the understanding that I gained from how this thing started help me navigate ways to keep my players interested, ways to keep myself interested in next week's session, right?
So to some extent, it seems like what I'm doing is also buoying up the Broasar case, in the sense of here's how they did it back in the day, and they had a ton of fun with it. Okay,
Yeah.
you would have these guys in the Twin Cities, and they would be playing these games at multiple levels. Okay, they would be at one point playing a ruler, they'd be doing some diplomacy, and then if actions came out to where you would have to do a battle, you would actually go to somebody's house, you set up the table, then you play the game.
Yeah.
This is part of what the Castle and Crusade Society was actually supposed to do. Okay, everybody got some land, you had a budget, okay, based on chainmail, because Gygax and Arneson said so. And
Cool.
then you came up with everything that you wanted to buy. Okay, you had a notion about what you'd be able to do, and you would then start making your moves in the game. And ultimately, it's about ruling a country, trying to figure out what the other guy's doing, and maybe take his stuff. And it's fun
Yeah.
and entertaining. And in some cases, women did play. All right.
And so inherently, you've got PvP just baked in from the get-go, right?
Yes,
Like,
because
that's
in war
on the
games, you are
table.
playing against each other. It's
Yeah.
not everybody's on the same team. We're going to go into the dungeon, right? It's
It's
okay.
not,
I'm
let's
playing
all
the
play
Union. You're
against
playing the
the
Confederacy.
story.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also not FIFI story time where nobody can die, right? And so you've got these guys. They die on like a 5 or a 6, and you have to remove this figure that's worth like 20 guys. So in your
Yeah.
head, you see men getting mowed down, blood
Yeah.
spraying, smell acrid smoke, and now all of a sudden they have to take a morale check. They're fleeing. The entire line is buckling. The entire war is now in the balance. You do something maybe stupid. You commit your general, just like Napoleon did, and then you might be able to actually save the line, right? Because again, they also do this kind of stuff in Warhammer.
Well, I'm just picturing, as you were saying that, I was picturing the boxed sets, the covers of the books, Warhammer, like those John Blanche, like two huge sides coming together. And
yeah, the old world doesn't actually do that well. Let me see if we can find my old Dwarf Army book, because
yeah,
I love just looking at it. Oh, there you are. I see it. Come here, Dowie. Okay. So.
one of the big wins that the bros got. Oh yeah,
Look at this. You want to play this?
You
okay?
do.
You don't know who
wanna
that
see
naked guy is up front with the mohawk, but you want to be him.
Yeah.
All right. You don't know what any of this stuff is, but there's some nasty orcs. Look, he got his head on a spike. That's a message.
Yep.
Don't come here.
Don't come around here.
Yeah.
I just
But
lost
he's
my
asleep. He realizes Gotrek, and he just can't die, which I also dislike. I've actually gotten bored with Gotrek and Felix because they do not really die. But then Age of Sigmar happens, and it's terrible.
Patty.
White Summer. I didn't wear it tonight.
No, I know you wore it on. You wore it on the basic expert. So
I did.
You've always got great drip, man. So you don't need to apologize for not wearing the same shirt.
I actually ran Castles and Crusades at Gen Con last year, so I picked up this from their booth.
Rock on.
I'm waiting for my Veiled Society events to get confirmed. They're just trying to find space for them right now.
I remembered what I wanted to say.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, people were saying, well, I don't want to play war game. I want to play D&D. And this is years ago. I just remember somebody in the bros. I can't remember who dropped the line. I want to say it was like Gelatinous Rube, or maybe it was Jeffro. Somebody like that was like, they're just mad that the Battle of the Five Armies wasn't the Battle of the Five Tieflings. And like that one, whoever dropped that banger put me away. If you know who it was, put it in the chat, because that was choice. Battle of the Five Tieflings.
That's a really good point there, because isn't there a piece of art in the new D&D where it's just like 6 tieflings at a table or something like that?
I think
most people know about that terrible
like,
piece of dwarf art where it's just like a bakery at a forge.
I feel like everything is just cozy tieflings lately. Everything is like pastel, cozy tieflings making a life with their found family and like
cozy core or something like that.
Yeah. Like there's one from
Is that
Evil
cozy
Hat
in the
Games
dungeon?
called Stew Pot, and it's like
Hmm.
you are a retired adventurer, and all the fun stuff is behind you,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you're just trying to keep your tavern going. Who wants to sit down? And I'm like, they're they they just want to play house. Everybody just wants to play house.
They want to
Like that.
pay to play house.
That
Although
is,
the odds are they'll buy the book and not read it.
yeah, that's sexist against me because I don't want to play that crap. I don't know any dudes that want to play that crap.
Right. Well, I
Hey,
mean, because we've got a great audience here, you guys all would have heard that when the lady was talking about how men have this instinctive need to conquer territory, that
yeah,
is inherently a sexist notion because it's reducing the human being in front of you to this abstract notion that is only dealing with their sex, okay?
hmm
It's just the mirror image of what was being thrown at Gygax.
yeah. It paints us as if we're all just the Tasmanian devil, ready to just spin around and blow raspberries.
That's only on Saturday nights, 6 to
Yeah.
10, blood will flow. Now, I
Well,
can't recall if
I
we actually
will
made this point
say,
tonight.
if anybody is giving away territory, like if there's any up for grabs, I'm into the free real estate.
But we were talking about some issues I have with Peterson. This is kind of what personally set me off when I bought this book. And because of TV, I spent a few $100 in Christmas that was supposed to go to an arcade cabinet buying these books because it just
Oh
wouldn't let me
man.
alone. Now, the bibliography in the first volume here is incomplete, okay? If you publish a book, all your sources should be in that book, okay? You
Yeah.
have to buy the second volume to know what all he used in this thing. I'm not doing that, okay? Every single thing I'm
So
using
that's where
in the
the
book is
the
going to be in the
comic
book.
came from.
Yes, it's exactly where that comic came from. And that was actually the Crusaders Chronicle issue 10, if you guys are interested in that over at TVE's website. So that bibliography thing kind of ticked me off because I want to know what's in there. Why can't
Yeah.
I have that? Okay.
So not
And
only do you have people that are hoarding the resources, but they're
Mhm.
not even telling you which ones among their hoard that they're basing their opinions on, so that you could even try to check that.
Yes, there are citations in the book, there are endnotes, and it actually explains what is what. But because you've been told it is incomplete, you will inherently be suspicious the entire time. What is not here that I do not know?
Yeah.
And am I allowed to know it?
And
Just hand it over.
can
Just
you
look at it.
even debate without getting over your
No,
skis because you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop where he's like, actually, that's from this one that I didn't show you yet, right?
exactly. Yes. And I know he's not here, but I have seen Griff do that on Twitter where he is using Arneson's authority on some things, but it's from a thing you can't see.
Hmm.
And that bugs me. It really does. Because, publish it. Publish it, please. I think I've bought like all their stuff now.
Yeah, well, I know they're working on Braunstein. Or I'm sorry, Braunstein. I got to say it right for the real one, Braunstein. And I don't know how easy it is, how that process is going. I feel like there may be a touch of the Arneson in Wesley, and I've never met him. I've not talked to him, so I don't have. I'm just guessing here. I'm
Okay.
probably wrong, but like I feel like one of the things about Arneson was that he was a legit genius who knew
Hmm.
how to play the game like no other, but he had a problem getting it down in a way that people could understand it. And so
Yes.
his first draft of Blackmore, I think that was part of the falling out, right? Was Tim Kask edited it into something that was, and
We
it
can
was,
say it was a contributing factor
yeah. So,
because one of Tim Cast's first big tasks was to take all of Arneson's notes and make them into the Blackmore's supplement.
and it sounds like it was not an easy job. Like he did not
No, it
relish the
wasn't.
duty. Yeah.
Tim Kask, I've watched a lot of interviews of him right now. He prefers to avoid trying to, say anything bad about Arneson, but to me, it's rather clear from his body language that, there must have been a fair amount of frustration where
Yeah.
you are just thrown these notes and you said you have to make something of this. And unfortunately, because of that and because of what Arneson did work, it takes a lot of time for him to put anything out.
Yeah.
And also because of how he thinks, it's why if you read First Fantasy Campaign, it doesn't give you how to play Blackmore. He makes a lot of references to chainmail. He makes some references to a magic system that's not in that book, and I would like to know what that was. It
Yeah.
to me read like it's some sort of roll to cast system, and I'd like to know what that was. I play dwarves in Warhammer. We don't do casting except for an Anvil of Doom, but magic is great. Do it, please.
Yeah. And I just wonder if Wesley is like that. Like so much of that type of game is just internalized, where it's
Hmm.
just muscle memory, and he may not even know what he needs to explain so that to get us to where it is, and he just may be bad at that. He's good at the
That's why
game.
the editor is actually very important here. You got to have somebody to
Yeah.
bounce ideas off of.
So
It's why it's
yeah,
ridiculous to call Gary a mere compiler of notes.
yeah.
He had to write that out. He had to hammer it into form. You're telling the blacksmith that he's not good for making his sword out of iron. Come on now.
It's kind of like when a novelist gets brought in on a movie and they have full say and whatever, and by the end they just throw their hands up and walk away from the movie, and they're like, "I
Hmm.
disavow." You know, it's just like
Yeah.
they're two
It's not
different
that.
things, and yeah. So and that stuff is difficult, and I'm not casting aspersions or any doubts or whatever, but I'm wondering if Griff's got his work cut out for him trying to get the full legible edited Braunstein rules out
Hmm.
of Wesley. And I mean, Wesley doesn't really need to publish them. He's been I think he's been running Braunstein at cons for longer than TSR was a company, if you add up the
Probably.
years and stuff. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
I think there
yeah.
might be a situation where just sitting down and doing an oral interview would help tease things out.
Mhm.
If nothing else, because of his advanced age, if you get him thinking about how things are done at a certain point, you might be able to find some gold in there.
Yeah, oh I'm sure you would. I'm sure he's probably
Hmm.
got I'm sure he's dropping gold on the regular, but there's the whole I don't know. I think the best bet is to do like Harmony and Jay Letourneau did is they went to DaveCon and they actually got to sit down and talk to the guy, right, and draw their own conclusions. Um, I don't know. I don't know how the stuff's going. I just wonder. At some point, I wonder when is the juice not worth the squeeze, right? Like when you get resistance and you
Hmm.
can't get the original sources and the things that that are led to believe from reading the rules, people from the time period said, well, we didn't mean any of that. Gary was just trying to sell books and he never played that way. And then you got to try and like figure out, like I'm talking about, conversations I've had with some of these folk. And it's like,
Right.
okay, so he was your friend, but you're making him sound like a liar. Right?
Is this
But
about Kuntz?
this is about Kuntz.
Let's just be about. Okay, so let's just address the Kuntz thing real quick. Okay, Gary
Because
didn't
man,
play that way.
I feel like Kuntz is very, very intelligent. And when I talk to
He
him,
is.
I get a lot out of it. When I try to read him, the language is so dense. I just feel like I'm a toddler. So I don't know if the writing works for me because
No, it's a
it's
fundamental problem.
yeah,
There are some passages in his books which I have looked at and mostly read that are nigh unintelligible.
yeah.
So you've got to
So
have a decent editor,
it's not
and
just
you
me
also
being
have
dumb.
to consider what he is writing in the context of everything else. Okay,
Yeah.
because when Kuntz talks about how the game was great until Gary changed it and made it into OD&D, you've got to consider the fact that he's got his own agenda about the history of the hobby. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
because when he's talking about, well, everything was great until you wanted gold and all that, and this guy was one of the original like writers and stuff. He made money off this.
Yeah, yeah.
Still making money off of adventures and whatnot. You've got to wonder where he's coming from and where he's wanting to go with that. Now, Gary didn't play that way. What does that mean? What, Gary didn't use the rules that he wrote? Why wouldn't you use the rules that you wrote for a war game? In Flint Dill's book, The Games Master, he talks about them playing chainmail at the D&D Cocaine Mansion in the 80s, baby. They played chainmail there. I didn't expect that. This has been a surprise so far.
Yeah,
I'm
that
further
is
surprised at
crazy.
myself for not really caring so much anymore that Gary was doing piles of coke, because I thought this was going to be a big problem. But you're talking about a guy who finally has made it a bit. He's now
Yeah.
divorced because that did happen, but his kids are adults. He's in Hollywood. It's the 80s. Reagan's the governor. So, hey, look, it's going to be a particular kind of time, right?
I'm just like Flint Dill, man. I'm thinking of the G.I. Joe cartoon that was like most of my childhood. Like the guy
Yeah,
that.
I've really come to enjoy the D&D cartoon along with
Oh,
that.
I haven't. I never watched that. I should probably go back and watch those.
Yeah, watch it. If you've got Amazon Prime, they get a D&D channel. They'll show the cartoon
Oh,
amongst some other
have you
shows.
ever watched the Inhumanoids?
I've not.
Dude, that show is nuts bonkers.
All
It
right,
was a
listen,
Saturday morning cartoon made by the same guys that did Transformers and G.I. Joe, but it must have
sweet.
been like right before the end because like they were getting away with crap I couldn't believe. They had this one monster. What was his name? Oh, I can't remember what his name was. He had a transparent belly, and like in one of the episodes, he
Is this
legit
a Warhammer mutant? Oh my god!
he's got like one eye. He looks like a dragon with one eye and a horn on his head, but he's got a transparent gut, and he swallows the main bad guy, and the guy's in his stomach digesting and like pounding to get let out, and the other guy's bargaining with him like, I'll make him throw you up if you agree to this. And it's
That's
like it's
awesome.
a kid's cartoon. It's like
Yes.
you gotta watch that, dude. It is nuts. It
Yeah,
is
I went ahead and wrote that
crazy.
down.
Yeah,
But no,
Inhumanoid. My parents were right. Mom, Dad, you
yeah,
were right to not let me watch that. You should
I'm
still
totally gonna
not
let my
let me
kid
watch.
watch that. Kid likes the D&D cartoon. I don't look when he's 12. Like everything is on the table. Okay, he can read my Berserk comics. He'll watch heavy metal. He's just
Right
gonna get
on.
the full exposure. It's gonna be a great time. But if we want to talk about how Gary played the game for just a moment,
Yes, please,
think
please.
of everything I have talked about tonight up until this point. You call people, you write letters, you talk to them about what you're doing in between. Okay, it's that one-to-one time stuff because Gary said so in the ADDMG. That's
Yeah,
important, guys.
yeah,
You thought about it's important beforehand. Okay, think about how they're playing diplomacy. How can it then be the case that he didn't actually run his games like that? Because most people are aware that Rob Kuntz was one of his original players. He did that whole Robolar thing. He looted the Temple of Elemental Evil and then screwed over the other party. How can you know where he is unless you're keeping strict time records about where people are and what they're doing? They
exactly.
then went and took his castle and sent Robolar flying away. That's impossible unless you know where people are at what time and what they're doing, because you have to keep these extensive notes about stuff. I started keeping
Exactly.
a calendar for my games as soon as we started doing domain play because, the players want their taxes,
Yeah.
right? They deserve that because they're rulers,
And
and
it's
they
more
didn't do a
fair
bad
if
job at
you're
it.
yeah, it's more fair and it's easier for you as the DM to adjudicate if it's tied to a real calendar. You don't have to make
Yes.
up the
Hmm.
75th of, Snumpsis or something. Like you just okay,
Right. Look, I
boom.
love Nastara, but I'd have to sit down and really look at that calendar
Yeah,
just to try
yeah,
to figure
yeah.
it out. There's probably Mr. Bulge video on that.
Well, and here's the other thing. What was Gary famous for in the DMG about like letting your players read the monster manual or the DMG? He was like, "Don't let them read it. If you have evidence that they have read it, you can take away their magic items." Right? Like he wanted to punish them. So it's
Hmm.
like, okay, so maybe Rob, I don't think Rob's lying, but maybe he was just young and he didn't know what Gary was doing. And again,
That's plausible.
please correct me because I don't know, but it's possible that Gary did not tell his players that he was doing the one-to-one time thing in the background because there's just stuff that he didn't think you got to know. It's just that if it's in the DMG, which is crazy to me because there's actual like character generation stuff that's in it. Like you can't make a full D&D character
Yeah.
without using both the player's handbook and the DMG in one
Well, it's
E.
because there's a fog of war between the
Yeah.
players and the DM because when there's too much information, you wind up spoiling the fantasy to some extent. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like how let's consider this for a moment. If you're doing OD&D and OD&D says you use chainmail to adjudicate these things, well, what happens when you don't? Well, you're not really playing it, are you?
That's right.
Why would it be the case that Gary Gygax would not be using his own system to play the game when he knew it front to back, didn't have to think about any of the charts? I knew the charts for Warhammer in my head, and so you
Yeah.
just roll the dice and there's your result. Bada bing, bada boom.
That is controversial too though. I've heard people say no, they didn't use chainmail, it was Totten. And I'm like, OD&D
It was
specifically.
Strategos? Really?
Yeah. I don't know how much Totten was in Blackmore versus Chainmail, because Chainmail is
Okay,
Gary
okay. I follow. I
and
follow.
and that also has to do with the whole who gets credit. There's so many other outside competing interests
Hmm.
that muddy the bottom of the river and just it makes things obscured because you've got to filter everything through who is
Yeah.
saying this and what do they have to gain.
Well, this is why we have to give authority to the sources, right? We need to
Yes.
start with what they say and what they wrote, okay? Gygax writes an OD&D, got to use chainmail. Okay, they're playing chainmail at the Coke Mansion.
He does
in First
one-to-one
Fantasy
time in
campaign.
OD&D. It's not just
Yes,
in 1E, right? He's
yes,
one-to-one
correct.
time in OD&D as well.
Because it's a habit they develop because they're war gamers and
Yeah.
they're thinking in periods of time. Because if you know anything about historical warfare, you campaign in seasons, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you read Sun Tzu, that's what a good portion of the book is about. When do you campaign? When do you not campaign? When do you actually go to the top of the hill to put your fortification up because there might be a monsoon or something like that? All right. So let's see. I pulled up my article that I wrote about the authority of chainmail and whatnot, and I'm just going to just read a little excerpt from the First Fantasy campaign,
Right on.
and we'll just kind of go from there. So this is, of course, Arneson's book. So it was with the Dungeon of Blackmore. It began with only the basic monsters in chainmail. Okay, so he refers to chainmail. Later, when it's talking about magic protection points on a different page, having gone over all my records, the surest indication is that the point values given in the first edition chainmail form the basis for my system.
Boom.
Exceptions occurred, which were due to the new creatures given beyond those in chainmail, and thus necessitating changes. Here's what I came up with. He's got these different ideas here, okay? Then there's actually a picture of this in the OD&D making of book to the effect of when they're talking about Blackmore, when they're talking about D&D, Arneson says that his chainmail modifications were fairly minor, and the big change was laying out the dungeon for explorations and the like, combined with a maze, which you have to map as you go along, thus offering the possibility of getting lost. Also, we were using Avalon Hill's outdoor survival board as a surface obstacle course for reaching a variety of destinations. Okay, so Gygax says it, Arneson says it. Why wouldn't they play like this?
Yeah.
All right. What's more authoritative, the guys who said that they did, or people who said that they did not? So, they both say it. Where do we go from
And then
here?
it's like,
Oh,
and so we know that the written word, once you put it down there, it is what it is. We know that. I
mhm.
mean, even Kuntz has famously pointed out to Gary that memories can be fallible, right? And Gary had a
Oh,
pretty
sure. That's
pointed
why
response
you
to
also
it.
need to consider the fact that Kuntz used to have like basically a perfect memory. That's
Hmm.
not necessarily going to be the case. 5 decades later. So that's why we go
Yeah,
back to these documents. Who said what when? What do we think it means? What can we then infer or argue about?
I will say I don't think Kuntz is like lying. I don't think he's trying to work an angle that I could tell. But he's going up against something that is very firmly stated in the rules. And so the
Hmm.
best I could tell, and I really should have grilled him more on this when I had the chance, and I'm really grateful that I did get the chance to talk to him. Um, I really should have grilled him more on how come Gary put those rules in. Was it just to make a bunch of wargamers happy? In the Bro SR, they even postulated that there was some shadowy figure, like some unnamed person that was bullying Gary into putting certain wargaming stuff in there that he really didn't want to. Like, who was alphaing Gary into putting one-to-one time and chainmail stuff and what was it? One of the blooms? Like, who was doing that? That was a fun little thought experiment. You look like you're starting to chew on it, though.
Well, I'm just wondering how somebody could come up with that based on perhaps something they read or what the argument would be. Because, you know, Don K was one of his friends, one of his gaming buddies.
Hmm.
They served TSR. Uh, Ryan Bloom was, by comparison, not much of a gamer. He was more of a business guy.
Yeah.
But then, we've seen how Gary Gygax has reacted this evening to, being somebody attempting to bully him or browbeat him or broadside.
Yeah, I get the feeling
And
that
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 was his
didn't go
reaction.
well. Yeah.
Um, in that rather famous meeting of the stockholders where Gary Gygax kind of blows up over the whole um,
They're trying to take my
thing
company
with,
from me thing,
well,
right?
not taking the company from him. It's when Arneson's about to be basically kicked out and Kuntz leaves and the Minnesota contingent, the Twin Cities guys basically leave TSR. Like, he really gets angry because the man did in fact have a temper.
Yeah.
So I don't see how you browbeat a guy like that. One can
Yeah.
expect Mary Jo was able to handle him. I mean, she's basically a Red Sonja herself, so I'm willing to bet as a tomboy she could handle him. They had 5 kids
Maybe.
together, so who knows?
Yeah, I'm sure it was just a silly theory, but like you're trying to put two things together in that like Gary did put that stuff in the games, and Rob says we never did it. Like specifically, I don't think he said it on air, but he said to me when we were talking, he said that 1-to-1 time stuff we never did it, like emphatically. So, yeah, I don't know what you do with
How
that.
do you figure out who's doing what in Greyhawk or in the Castle and Crusade Society?
Yeah, well, and it's not just D&D. Like
Right.
there are so many games around that time period that all either use 1-to-1 or explain why they're doing 4-to-1 or why they're doing a variation of it. And it just seems like it was part of the DNA. It wasn't that nobody did it; it's that everybody did it. If you look at the adventure for Castle Amber, where they have to explain, okay, we're gonna create this new mechanic, because we're not gonna let you go back home and rest and train, and you because you get the feeling up until that point everybody was beginning and ending in town, and they're like we're gonna stick you in here, but like there's a rejuvenation effect of the mist so that your downtime isn't going to be suffering from being stuck in the dungeon between sessions, right? And it's like
right. With Castle Amber, you are stuck in the castle, right? You got
yeah, I believe so.
kind of like
but there's like rooms with like fog in it or something that will like pretty much.
Oh, like in Final Fantasy, you find a little room and it's got the little safe spot. Like, all right, I'll use my tent. I'll save my game.
Yeah, safe spot, not a save spot. Right?
Yeah.
So let me catch up with the chat.
Oh, yeah.
DM Blackwall says, and hey, friend of the channel. I love this guy. I'm gonna go play with him soon. This July. I think you might be there actually, right?
I'll be going up as well. Gonna do some Wargaming Advanced, baby.
We're gonna throw some bones together, bro.
Gonna die.
He says it is likely that Gary did not perfectly adhere to the published system at home games because he would have been working on the rules during the home games. So yeah, well, Blackwall would know a thing or two about developing rules and practice them and working on them and stuff. Malachi says phrasing. Oh no, what did I say? Hopefully someone didn't just clip some awkward thing.
No, just take it. It's fun.
Just take it. Just roll with it. All right. Right on, man. A Raptor says, Kuntz, in my opinion, didn't really engage with the rules. Gary was such a Chad, he could just easily fuse all the rules of chainmail and ODD into a single rule set without his player's knowledge. And yeah, I didn't get the sense that Kuntz ever played much chainmail. Like he didn't seem like he was interested in that part of the game. He was more interested in the fantastical adventures and that kind of thing. So I don't know. Again, it was a huge conversation. We talked about a lot of stuff, and I'm not smart. I don't have perfect recall, so I don't remember exactly what was said or how. Maybe I should go back and watch that episode again. All right. Have a good night, Patty. Thanks for being with us, bro. White Dwarf Summer. Woo. Oh my gosh, dude. It's almost been 2 hours. Holy cow. I feel like we were just scratching the surface. I can't believe
we're just scratching the surface. It's a big topic.
Yeah, it is. All right. Well, what have we left on the table? What have we not? I'm using StreamYard, so we're not going to get kicked off at 2 hours like EV Mux would.
Yeah.
What else did you have prepared that I have not permitted you to get out yet?
Let's see. We've gone over a fair amount of the material I had tonight. I got a list here of points of contention I have with Peterson.
Okay.
With notes about his various stuff.
How many check marks have you gone down the clipboard yet?
I kind of talked about feminism. One thing I didn't really talk about was Appendix N. That's something that I got to talk about in this book because it does get ignored. I've read just a little bit of this, but with the recent Brosar controversy, I decided to get these books because it's important. It needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
Because if you've read the source material, especially Jack Vance, stuff makes more sense.
Way more sense.
There was one thing I had thought about bringing up, and it is, of course, Tolkien.
Right on.
These are actually
I haven't read that. The Monsters and the Critics.
The Monsters and the Critics and other essays. These are some of his academic things. And in here is a speech called On Fairy Stories. And in it, he talks about how art is an act of subcreation. And it's how I like to think of a game, okay? So, effectively, what you are doing is you are creating, by your words, when it comes to D&D and also by the game mechanics, a sub-reality, okay, in which everybody can potentially have fun by interacting with it. And
Yeah.
also because it is that sub reality, you shouldn't be taking it for World War II for real. You numpty.
Yeah. Someone's
Okay.
got to play the bad guys, right? Someone's got to be
Yes.
Sauron.
As I said on TV stream a long time ago, somebody has to play the damn Italians, and it's going to be me.
Yeah.
Because, Rome, baby.
We got Chubby Funster in the house. He says, "I'm late, but
Hey,
I'm here to
Chubby.
party." You have an excuse for being late. He was on the air earlier today, so we'll take it, bro.
Sweet,
Um,
sweet. But no, I was just going to touch on that a little bit.
let's do it. Let's go there.
Yeah, I've got a small section here. I think I'll just find a little selection to read, and that might actually inspire something. Okay, so ridiculous though it may be for one so ill-instructed to have an opinion on this critical matter, I venture to think the verbal distinction philologically inappropriate and the analysis inaccurate. The mental power of image making is one thing or aspect, and it should be appropriately called imagination. The perception of the image, the grasp of its implications, and the control, which are necessary to a successful expression, may vary in vividness and strength. But this is a difference of degree in imagination, not a difference in kind. The achievement of the expression which gives, or seems to give, the inner consistency of reality is indeed another thing or aspect needing another name. Art, the operative link between imagination and the final result, subcreation. For my present purpose, I require a word which shall embrace both the subcreative art in itself and a quality of strangeness and wonder in expression derived from the image, a quality essential to the fairy story. What we do when we play these games is exactly what he's talking about. Now, look, Tolkien is an English Roman Catholic, so in his mind, the act of subcreation is to some extent participating in creation, under the creator.
Yes.
And because of that, it has a almost religious significance to some extent. Most of you will know, because you're interested in this stuff, that the Lord of the Rings, especially in its revision, is a Catholic story. So when Tolkien is talking about this stuff, he is also referring to something that we all do when we play this game. And it's also why people enjoy going to, say, different dungeons in the 1970s, because they're all different. They've all got these different ideas, these different expressions. Although, for our purposes, it winds up being probably too much, and that's why standardization winds up happening with TSR down the line. This entire book is just fantastic for other stuff as well. So, for example, it's got an essay on Beowulf, about translating Beowulf. It's got some stuff on Gawain and the Green Knight, which everybody should read. And it's got that on fairy stories bit. And everybody really should get a hold of this if you're interested in this stuff.
Yeah.
Because,
sure.
not only being a polylinguist, he's also one of the fathers of our hobby, even if Gygax didn't like the Tolkien estate after a certain point.
Yeah.
But we still have these dwarves and hobbits and elves and men,
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things Kuntz told me, was that it was pretty much when Arneson came up with it, he was thinking about Tolkien, and he was watching like monster movies on the Saturday matinee.
Yeah, I read that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, hey, Erudite, welcome to the channel, man. Welcome
especially
to
the case with Conan, right? Conan's kind of our main exemplar for the hobby because, he's a guy, he goes off, he does adventures, he goes through all kinds of different jobs, he does all kinds of different things, and then almost by accident becomes a king, and then he has responsibilities.
Yeah.
And that's what's neat about the Phoenix and the Sword. It's not Conan building up to being a king, it's Conan starting as a king, and then he has to deal with an assassination attempt. And then you get to see all the cool stuff that happened beforehand.
Right on.
Though we have to keep in mind, we need to keep with Howard for the kind of Conan that Gary and Dave Arneson were exposed to. Because although I like some of the later authors, they are, of course, it's largely a different character. All right.
The interesting thing about Conan becoming a king wasn't that he was trying to, or that he was like building up to it. It's that he was not civilized, and now he's in charge of a civilization, right? Like that was what was kind of the interesting bit about that. And yeah, like you say, that's the very first story. I think the Phoenix and the Sword actually started as a Cull story, if I'm not mistaken, and then got edited into a Conan one.
But luckily, Gygax's dad, who was actually rather old, brought Gary that book. Okay, it was like one of those magazines, one of the pulps, and said, "Hey, you might like this." And now, here we are.
Rock
doing
on.
cool stuff.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
that is one of the
needs to be talked about. I need to add Tolkien into it just to talk a little bit about this idea of subcreation,
Mm-hmm.
because when you think about it that way, you're not thinking about the prime, okay, the prime material plane of which we all participate in, but rather what you're creating at the table.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
then
I
to
got
some
I
extent,
got
the
a lot of thought.
prime also includes our rules, okay,
Mm-hmm.
but then in that subcreation, you have changed them.
I do
So that
think
might be a
that
different way to think about it, actually.
I
I just
do
thought of
think
that.
that having that background in Appendix N makes you a better player because it makes
Mhm.
you, when you were reading that quote about, how much of the image can you see? That's going to vary. I mean, I think of the
Yeah,
meme about like who can
the
picture
apple.
the apple and turn it,
Mhm.
right? So people are going to have varying, but they can all, if you can do that, that is worth doing. That's part of the thing that transports you. But the more of the Appendix N that you've read, you have more of a vocabulary for that. And if all
Yeah.
you read was Tolkien, you'd think elves were a certain way. But if you've
Hmm.
read The Broken Sword and you've read Three Hearts and Three Lions, then you know that elves can also be a certain other way that is, they seem pleasant enough. They invite you to the party under the hill. And then when you come out after what you thought was a raucous night of debauchery and you realize all of your friends died 100 years ago, you realize, oh,
Right.
these elves aren't as cool as I thought they were.
Yeah. I still feel like I've not read much of Appendix N, but I got a notion of it. Probably most
Yeah.
I've read is Elric because
Oh,
they're
well, yeah.
weird. Elric's an interesting character. And I've read all of the Conan stories that Howard wrote. Three Hearts and Three Lions was so good I could not put it down. That hasn't happened to me for a very long time
That
because
book is my favorite right now, Appendix
it's
N.
kind of like John Carter. Of all things, it's an isekai, to use the
Yeah.
Japanese term. You get sucked into this world, and it's also the basic plot of Quag Keep, which was written
Okay.
by a woman.
Yeah, but like so in Three Hearts, Three Lions, you immediately understand alignment because you know that
Mhm.
the chaos forces they can't abide the sun. It burns them, it hurts them,
Yeah.
and their kingdom is in twilight, and they are trying to conquer more land and they spread the cloud over the face of the earth so that they don't get
Mhm.
hurt by the sun. It makes it very it's not like a moral thing. Well, would I do this or would I do that? It's like, no, I want this side to win so that I don't get burnt up. And then the humans are like, we need crops to eat and live.
Mhm.
We kind of need the sun,
Yeah,
right?
and to
And
some extent, you can call that an Orientalism.
right on. But yeah, you're right. He starts off in World War II, right?
Yeah, he just gets
He's
sucked
a
up
Danish
because
freedom fighter, and
yeah, he was about to get shot or something like that,
yeah,
but
like
then
gets shelled or something, and then wakes up in a forest.
and there's a
Um,
horse with armor waiting for him.
Ear Trumpet, thanks for the super sticker. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for being a part of the show and supporting in the way that you do.
Thank
And
you.
Erudite, you and Chubby were on the same show, right? So that's why you guys are coming in at the same time. Um,
Sweet. What's going on?
right on, guys. So go watch that. If you guys probably already saw that before you came over here, but if you didn't, go back and watch their stuff too, because I'm sure it's awesome.
Yep.
All right, so Appendix N. We talked about Tolkien and what that, in a Catholic sense, or I'm a Protestant but still a Christian,
Sure.
the idea that we have the Imago Deus on us, and that
Mhm.
there is something holy about using our wills to create.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which is kind of ironic because Gary was a man of faith as well, and then the
Yeah. He
whole
was a Jehovah's Witness.
satanic panic thing happened and came around, and we don't need to go off on that tangent. Um, but I really do think that learning how they approached the game and how they thought about it it's not just fascinating historically, but it can make us better players now. It can open up different opportunities than we might not have had. If I didn't know about some of the shenanigans that were pulled back by the Blackmore bunch
Hmm.
from reading and watching that movie, um, it would have dropped my jaw when Slippery Pete started like boosting from the party and doing selfish thief things, right? I would
Yeah.
have been like, "Oh, he's a problem player and he needs to go," instead of being
Right. How
like,
do you deal
"Oh
with the
my
players doing
gosh."
what they want? Yeah.
Yeah, instead of me being like, "Hey man, I just learned this invisibility spell. If you cut me in on it, I can help you get more stuff."
Right. Right. Right.
You know, it's like when you don't know what the guy next to you is up to, it brings this whole new level of immersion. Or I know Fluid doesn't like the word immersion. I'll say engagement.
Not immersion's a good word. I like to think of it in that fashion because
Okay.
you start the session, you start doing a description. The
Mhm.
idea is kind of like you're at a campfire, you're summoning up these ghosts, okay? So if I start doing the Iliad, you're going to be thinking about, lordly Menelaus or swift-footed Achilles, and so on. Yeah,
I feel like it's also a great way. Like this is something I appreciated more as a child than as an adult, but maybe I should think more of it in these terms. It's a great way to try things out that may not be part of who you are,
sure.
right? Like maybe if I'm a people pleaser and I'm more, apt to buckle under and stuff, I can practice being an assertive guy in the game, and maybe in some way something that I learned from how that goes, good or bad, where I can fail. I can fail where it's safe to fail, and I don't just burn bridges and lose friendships. And then you can take that out into, okay, I'm going to negotiate for the price of this truck, and
Mhm.
I'm not going to be Dundermoose in this moment. I'm going to be Bumblebore trying to, use every edge to gain, leverage or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what I'm
I
talking
gotta say, I
about.
like playing jerk merchants
Jerk merchant.
because
Yeah.
adventurers, they are itinerants.
Mm-hmm.
They typically don't have much in the way of influence. So these people come into your shop and you're like, dang gold pieces, how about that? Where else are you going to take it? I'm the only shop in town, guys.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when an actual player's skill and not just a role can come into play.
Yeah.
And that's something I rather enjoy doing because my players, actually over a number of years, actually built up this pretty good rapport with a merchant. And
Okay.
eventually, when he got kidnapped, they kind of flipped and they tried
Yeah.
to find him by every possible means.
You're like,
They
that's where I
eventually
get my
found him.
potions, man. You can't take him.
Kind of, yeah. It's like it's their only access to finding magical items because this guy's got connections.
Yeah. I feel like when I've plumbed the depths of the BroSR methodology and I've mastered all of it, I am going to loop in the 4D part just for the ultimate extreme of everything. We'll see how that goes. Maybe that's never going to happen. I don't know.
Does it spin off into an entirely new thing on its own?
It might. Who knows? Jeffro once told me, do something nobody else has done and then crow about it with all your might. So it's a very Jeffro thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's had his influence. He's kind of disappeared from the internet, but we're talking about him right now. We're
Yeah,
still talking about Gygax and everybody.
I wish I could talk to him about why he left. I don't know if I got a hunch that he was just getting so much more satisfaction out of other areas of his life that
Right.
everything he tried to do here, he just got backlash and ankle bit and second guessed, and it just stopped being fun for him.
Yeah.
Part of me wonders if, in his mind, and I'm not saying it is for everybody, but in his mind, if the BroSR is a solved problem, right? And those aren't my original words. I've heard
Interesting.
someone else say that. I don't want to
Yeah.
claim that I came up with that, but like that they figured it out. They solved
Hmm.
it. They did what they could. They moved the needle, and now it's just a matter of, um, figuring out what it means. I don't personally feel that way because I feel like if you look at what the Living Earth guys are doing, like if you look like people like Crom and Jacob Laterno, like they are continuing to hone and perfect the Steen type of game to where they're getting better at developing them, giving players their motivation so that when you have a sheet, you got like 3 goals and that the goals are aimed at causing conflict with the other players under the fog of war and that kind of stuff. So I don't personally think the bros are done yet. I think they're still investigating and innovating and coming up with new stuff. But I wonder if part of it was Jeffro was like he felt like he'd in some sense arrived when Broser came out. I don't know.
Oh, as in it maybe had enough inertia to just keep on going on its own,
Mm-hmm. And he was
to
like,
where
I'm
it'll
going to go
continue
focus on
iterating
areas
and
that give me
innovating.
more joy.
Yeah.
I know he was dancing. I know he was writing about dancing and like getting a lot of attention for that. And
Yeah. Hey,
probably not the
do your
same
thing.
kind of attention he was getting here in the the hobby wasn't good enough for him.
And so
He
he decided
deserved
to
better
touch
than he
grass
got.
and maybe dance with a lady. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Right on.
Oh,
Oh,
I do have to
Bradford.
get on Dungeons and Dyslexia in about 12 hours. So,
Okay,
you
yeah,
guys, for
yeah.
some final
Dude,
questions at this stage.
I would say let's look back again at the upcoming Kickstarter. If you guys are fascinated by this stuff and in 2 hours, we certainly did not even begin to scratch the surface. So I'm really excited for this project. I'm going to be pushing it when it comes out, and I'm going to be getting my copy. So here's the Kickstarter link. I'm going to actually grab that and put it in the chat as well, so you guys can. And it is starting in July, so we do not have long. There you go, and you got to come back on. We got to finish talking about all the stuff we just started. So anytime you want
so
to,
I'll tell you what. You
open
find
invitation.
sometime you kind of go through this and maybe think about what we should elaborate on, and we'll do that next time.
Right on. And maybe after the Kickstarter's live, while it's still live, you may be getting some frequently asked questions and stuff, and you're like, I want to address that, and you can come on, and I will be glad to have you back on, man. This was a fun interview. Again, I can't believe.
Just grill me on something, please.
The 2 hours just went by. Thank you guys. I feel like our chat was a who's who as well. This is a pretty lit chat. And so if you guys like this, please go ahead and click that thumbs up button. Give us some support and let the algorithm know, hey, other people need to be watching this stuff. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe for more of these conversations. And with that being said, thanks for being with us tonight. Go out to support the Kickstarter. Go out and read Tolkien's Monsters and Critics. And y'all have a great night.
Have a good one, guys.